Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Mon. President Trump ready to strike Iran again if peace talks fail. What he says about the conduct of the Iranian regime during the ceasefire. The work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz continues. Iran is still holding the critical passage hostage. The steps President Trump is taking now. Vice President JD Vance warning Tehran not to play the U.S. as he departs for Islamabad for talks to end the war with Iran. A big legal blow for Meta platforms. Massachusetts top court says the tech giant must answer claims it knowingly addicted victims. A U.S. trade court is hearing a key case today weighing the legality of President Trump's 10% global import tariff, which 24 states are challenging. Lawmakers speak to the Artemis II crew as they prepare to come home. What to expect as the Orion capsule attempts its splashdown later today.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. President Trump saying he's ready to strike Iran again if peace talks fail in Pakistan. The president telling the New York Post that U.S. warships are being reloaded. This comes as Vice President JD Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are heading to Pakistan to negotiate a peace deal. Trump says we'll find out if the talks are successful in about 24 hours. The president tells the New York Post that U.S. warships are reloaded with the best weapons ever made, and if Iran can't reach a deal, he will be using them. Trump also suggests that the Iranian regime is being untruthful. The president posting on Truth Social today, quote, "The Iranians don't seem to realize they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate." Just yesterday, he also criticized the Iranian regime for how they're not allowing free passage through the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting this may be against the ceasefire agreement. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett saying the Strait of Hormuz will be open within 2 months. Here he is on Fox Business this morning.
You think we can open the straits and get the flow of oil going within the next, say, 2 months?
Yes. So, I can't go into, classified stuff, but first, we're very, very hopeful. We've got the A team going to Pakistan to negotiate with the Iranians, and we also have backup plans if necessary.
Okay.
Hassett says removing the Iranian regime would make the world better off in the long run. He points to higher potential for economic growth and investment in the Gulf area once the threat of Iran is removed. He also says energy prices will drop once the Strait of Hormuz reopens, adding that only about 10% of the normal traffic is transiting through the waterway. Ship tracking data shows the strait seeing minimal traffic today. Between Wednesday and yesterday morning, only 7 ships passed through the strait, a fraction of the 140 ships that would normally pass. The work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz continues. Iran is still holding the critical passage hostage. President Trump sending a warning to the regime while working on a solution with foreign leaders. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz on Friday still seeing minimal traffic. Tracking data from marine traffic shows that almost no ships are passing through. Most vessels sailing through the strait are linked to Iran. Also on Friday, an Israeli intelligence official telling Fox News that Iran is charging a fee for ships to pass, saying the strait is effectively under full Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps control. They decide who gets to go through, but more importantly, who doesn't. This corresponds with a statement from President Trump made a day earlier, saying there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now.
Military and diplomatic strength.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying he spoke with President Trump on Thursday night about reopening the passage. Here's what they discussed.
We've been pulling together a coalition of countries, now over 30 countries, working on a political and diplomatic plan, but also looking at military capabilities and actually the logistics of actually moving vessels through the strait. So that was the focus of the discussion last night.
Prime Minister Starmer completing a trip to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, where they discussed reopening Hormuz and the current ceasefire. Starmer says him and the Gulf nations agreed on several points.
Strait of Hormuz has to be part of the solution, a very strong sense that there can't be tolling or restrictions on that navigation.
Britain's Foreign Secretary agrees, saying the Strait of Hormuz must be fully reopened without restrictions or tolls. The blocking of this vital waterway is hitting trade around the world. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
To talk to us about the recent developments in the ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran, joining us now is Babak Shikarabi, political analyst and founding member of Cyprus the Great Institute. So first of all, thank you for coming on the show today. I just want to start off by asking you, President Trump today posting online saying, and I'm saying this as a quote, the world's most powerful reset. He didn't give any further explanation. I think it could mean a number of things. But let me ask you, do you think there has been a reset in the Middle East?
Hi, Don. Thank you for having me. It's very difficult to say yes or no when it comes into that regards. We have to remember when the war started, the objectives of this war, militarily at least, were not to stop until this regime collapses. At least in few occasions, President Trump says the regime change is on table and it's not a bad thing. So those were the messages being telegraphed to the world. Now, obviously, that hasn't happened. The regime, at least the narrative that it's using for the domestic audience, is that they have come victorious out of this. And obviously, we saw the European countries didn't join that military coalition. All of this plays into the hands of the regime in Iran. So as it stands, if I were to just guess based on what we see out there, would be no, there is no reset because the regime has remained in power. The same group of people are still running the country. We don't know if the Supreme Leader, the son, is still alive or not, and what condition he is in. We don't know who the American administration is negotiating with, and if that group that they're negotiating, if they represent the entire factions, whatever we have within the regime in Iraq.
So you're saying the Iranian regime potentially is portraying this, at least domestically, as a victory to itself. So I talked to a guest, I think a couple of days ago on this. He said it's actually dangerous for the Iranian regime to think that it has won because, Iran really, militarily speaking, has no cards. President Trump, I think, said that as well. The U.S. holds all the cards. So do you think it's dangerous for Iran to think that it has a victory here?
Well, they don't have the conventional army in a sense that to be able to have a war that is going to last for a few years. But definitely their missile capabilities has proven effective. That's undeniable. The pressure that they exerted on the world economy resulted the political objective they were following. And we're seeing the result of that. A negotiation is about to take place. It is dangerous for the regime in Iran to portray this as a victory in a sense that that small group of people who support the regime would become even more fanatic than before. These are the armed group that they're in there. They're wounded. Their supreme leader has been eliminated. A bunch of their military generals have been eliminated. And if the regime portrayed this as a victory, they would get the false feeling of that they can continue on this war and essentially achieve the ideological and religious objective that has been promised to them for 47 years. So in that sense, yes, it could be dangerous for the regime. But we also have to remember, if you look at the events taking place after the October 7, 2023, there is a sense of very negative view towards Israel by the Muslim population in the region. These people right now, they see the regime in Iran as the only government who stood up to Israel for nearly 80 years, fired missile at them, and then here's it still standing. In that regard, those people would be very unhappy with their own governments who have been looking for a political solution. So if that happens, we're gonna see, in my opinion, we're gonna see perhaps many uprising in those countries by the Muslim population in their countries against the governments there. So even if the regime in Iran falls, if the things remain the same, if the regime in Iran falls, we're going to see, if it doesn't fall, we're going to see the negative effect of this regime remaining in power far beyond Iran's borders for perhaps many decades to come. So these are the things we have to be mindful of.
Okay, so to your point that if the regime doesn't fall in Iran, what is its strategy right now? Amid this pressure from the U.S., negotiations happening on Saturday as well. The president saying if negotiations fail, attacks could resume. So what is Iran's strategy right now? It seems like it's not even allowing more ships to go through the Strait of Hormuz.
We don't know if the U.S. had that in its toolbox to kind of exert that pressure at the moment. So there's no doubt militarily, U.S. obviously is a superpower. The military of the regime in Iran cannot stand up to it. But talking about this Strait of Hormuz, they have proven that they have been able to shut it down. As far as the regime and standing in power, what's happening inside Iran, if I bring you and your audience to sequence of events, back in December and early January, there was a massive uprising. People responded back to Prince Reza's call. They took to streets in millions. And obviously, many of them paid by their lives. There was an enormous amount of violence used against them. We don't have the exact numbers. We don't know exactly to what extent the atrocity used against Iranian people because of the internet blackout. But then after that, it comes the start of this war. But at no point we saw American administration cozy up to Prince Reza, the head of the opposition in Iran, or he resides outside of Iran. I mean, the opposition against the regime in Iran. Had the American administration has shown some sort of support for people of Iran and the name that they had chanted, I believe we would have seen a more clear picture portrayed for the Iranian people. They perhaps would have taken on the street and add more pressure from within. That hasn't been seen to this point. So it's kind of confusing for the Iranian people not to know what kind of objective the American administration is pursuing. Do they want a regime change, or do they want to make this regime to change its behavior? If it's the change of the behavior as it stands, we see obviously nothing has changed. They portraying their full support for their proxies, especially Hezbollah and Houthis and etc. They're still talking about the same rhetorics. They're still following the same ideological goals, and militarily, they're still a threat against the countries in the region.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the ceasefire a little bit more. In your view, do you think Iran is genuinely trying to uphold this ceasefire? How would you characterize the strength of this ceasefire? They
need to. So I have no doubt there is at least understanding of how badly they need this, because keep that in mind. If this continues, eventually at one point, people in Iran are going to take back on the street. And that's something that the regime cannot afford. But if you also look at the targets eliminated by the U.S. strikes or Israeli strikes, majority of the people who got killed, the generals, the high-ranking officers that got killed, they were the ones that they were in charge of the IRGC, but not the ones that they were in charge of suppressing people inside the borders of Iran. Some of them have been, I'm not denying that, but I'm saying that if that had been pursued, if the riot police and etc. have been targeted perhaps more, that would have created a better opportunity for Iranian people to take it on the street. So the regime, as it stands, having those forces to some degree intact, is in need of this ceasefire to gain momentum, to keep control, and make sure that there would be no another uprising. So if you look at it from just internal perspective, they need it more than anybody else. But if you look at from the perspective that what kind of pressure they can exert to the neighboring countries, it seems like their missile program it's somewhat still effective and can deliver damages to the countries and pressure the world economy.
Okay, if they need this ceasefire, I still wonder why they won't let more ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. But you can talk about that. But I want to ask you this. So the peace negotiations is happening tomorrow, as I mentioned earlier. What do you think Iran will try to get out of this meeting? What is Iran's tactic for this peace negotiation?
Well, I'll respond back to the earlier question. To hold on to the Strait of Hormuz, it's essentially a tool they can use to pressure the world to kind of come to their aid and help them to achieve a peace that it would last long. That's the reason. They're pressuring the world's economy. And at this point, because the military campaign has been halted, so there's no reason for them to open up the Strait of Hormuz. At the same time, we see there are attacks happening from Israel inside Lebanon against Hezbollah, which is the regime's proxies in the region. The regime either has to support its proxies, or if it stops supporting those proxies, it's going to lose face amongst all the Muslim nations who has supported them. So that's the dilemma the regime has. They have to get some sort of a peace deal that keeping their proxies intact. And I'm not sure if Israel is going to allow that to happen. At the same time, it seems like the American administration is more concerned about opening the Strait of Hormuz rather than immediately dealing with the proxy support that the regime offers.
All right. Okay. Just one final question here. I want to ask you about the ideology of the Iranian regime. Some guests we have talked to in the past said there has been a regime change, technically speaking, but there hasn't been a change in ideology. So the ideology of the regime remains the same as before. And the question here is, I want to ask you, some of the guests have said it's impossible to get rid of the Iranian regime's ideology. They say it's like you want to get rid of evil from the world. Do you agree with this statement?
To a degree. First of all, just like I said earlier, we don't know who's in charge of the regime right now. If the supreme leader, the son, is not in full charge of his faculties, if he's physically or mentally is not in a shape to control the country, then who's controlling the country? There would be a power vacuum, and there would be different faction of the regime following different objectives, perhaps. So we're going to see some sort of a gap in between there, but we don't know yet. We don't know. All the intelligence reports are pointing out that the supreme leader is in coma and is not in a shape to control the country. And if those are true, they're completely against what the regime in Iran is portraying. They're saying that he's very well, he's in control of everything, and he's essentially signing off everything that's happening there. So first we have to know who's in control of the regime. Once we know that, and I think in the next few days or perhaps weeks, we're going to have a more clear picture as who's alive, who's dead, who's in charge, who's not in charge. As far as the objective that regime is following, things have got even far worse than before, in a sense that small group of people, armed group of people, militias, IRGC, etc., that they're supporter of the regime. If they view this as a victory, they would be persisting on following the path they have traveled for 47 years. And if whomever representing the regime says otherwise, is going to lose their support, that creates a problem for them they cannot afford, because most majority of Iranian people are against them. And if this armed group, IRGC and police and etc., if they're not supporting the regime could fall in no time. So that creates a challenge for the regime to follow the ideology or to not to follow the ideology. So even if there are a group of people in charge who have the senses to come to understanding that they, in order to survive, they have to back off from that ideological stance they've had. But in reality, in actions, they cannot. But again, at this point, we don't know who's in charge. The people who are in charge might be, from the ideological standpoint, worse than what the people that we had seen before. All in all, I don't think this regime is capable of changing its DNA for multiple reasons. First, it loses support of that very minimal group of people who are supporting it. Secondly, it's going to lose the support of all the proxies in the region, which been a tool for them to pressure people inside Iran and the other countries outside of Iran. So for these two reasons alone, I don't see they do a 180-degree turn.
Okay, very clearly said. Very interesting conversation as well today. Let's leave it there. Babak, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Have a good day.
ICE officials are addressing the case of a Haitian national in the country illegally charged with the brutal hammer murder of a Florida mother. Let's take a look.
Talk about a woman who was savagely murdered in our community at the hands of a violent illegal alien. So on April 3rd, the Fort Myers Police Department in Fort Myers, Florida, responded to a horrific crime scene at a gas station where an innocent mother was violently attacked and murdered. Their surveillance footage, which is circulating widely on social media, shows Robert Joaquin, a Haitian illegal alien, brutally striking the victim multiple times in the head with a hammer. This senseless act has shocked our community and underscores the critical importance of immigration enforcement and our role in public safety. Through the coordinated efforts of the Fort Myers Police Department, ERO, HSI, the U.S. Marshals, CBP, Air and Marine Operations, this man was swiftly located and apprehended. The speed and accuracy in which our law enforcement teams were able to track the killer's movements and arrest him is a testament to our robust law enforcement partnerships here in the state of Florida. Currently, Mr. Joaquin is being held at the Lee County Jail on charges of homicide and property damage. ERO has issued an immigration detainer and will ensure that he is never released into the communities or the streets of the United States again. Joaquin, an illegal alien from Haiti, first entered the United States on August 9th, 2022, near Key West, Florida, subsequent to a maritime smuggling operation. He was arrested by the United States Border Patrol. He was turned over to ICE ERO for detention and was later issued a immigration judge's final order of removal on September 9th, 2022. The prior administration allowed him to be released into the United States and subsequently granted him temporary protected status, giving him a legal safeguard to remain in our country. As of yesterday, the Trump administration stripped that safeguard, and his protections are now revoked. On June 27, 2025, the Trump administration announced the termination of temporary protective status for Haiti. It was determined that country conditions have improved to the point where Haitians can be returned safely. TPS, temporary protective status, was never designed to be a permanent stay in the United States, but for decades it's been abused as a de facto amnesty program. As we have ended TPS, the courts have obstructed the administration from restoring integrity to our immigration system. On March 11th, the Trump administration and the Supreme Court asked the Supreme Court to clear the way for it to end TPS for more than 350,000 Haitian immigrants. The case that occurred here in Fort Myers highlights the President's objective to restore law and order to our country and enforce immigration laws enacted by Congress. We here today stand together to reaffirm our commitment alongside our partners with Homeland Security Investigations, Fort Myers Police Department, to keeping our communities safe and secure. Here in the state of Florida, we do that. We do that every day. We do that proudly. We do that with the Florida Sheriff's Association, with all the police chiefs. All the state and local partners work very well together here in the state of Florida, and we continue to reaffirm that daily. We've set a standard for 287G partnerships here. We have 325 agreements with just this fiscal year alone, over 6,000 arrests associated with those 325 agreements, by far the most in the country. We lead the way in enforcement, and we've seen tremendous success because of the cooperation in the state of Florida. As a highlight of that cooperation, I would like to introduce one of our great partners, Fort Myers Police Department Chief Fields.
Good afternoon. My name is Jason Fields, and I proudly serve as the police chief for the city of Fort Myers. Today highlights the results that can transpire with strong partnerships between federal, state, and local agencies. Robert Joaquin was taken into custody after an extensive, coordinated manhunt. From the beginning, our commitment was unwavering, and our message was clear. We were not going home until Joaquin was in custody. I want to thank our federal partners, along with our state and local agencies, for their relentless effort, coordination, and shared resources that assisted and ultimately led to his capture. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the assistance from our community, who were also instrumental in his apprehension. As this case moves through the court process, I'll also recognize our amazing state attorney, Amira Fox, and her team as they continue pursuing justice for the victim and her family. This was a horrific crime. Evil individuals who commit violent acts in our community will be pursued, held accountable, and brought to justice. I will now turn it over to Micah McCombs, Acting Special Agent in charge with Homeland Security.
Thank you, Chief Fields. My name is Micah McCombs, serving as the Acting Special Agent in charge for HSI, covering Southwest Florida. HSI is the principal investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security, and we share a building with enforcement and removal operations. So when that call came in that this subject was on the run, a seamless search ensued with our partners. The Fort Myers Police Department is one of our best partners. In fact, one of the first agents from HSI to take part in the search is a former FMPD officer. Our partnerships in Southwest Florida are extremely strong. This tragic event to this United States citizen who came here the right way 6 years ago, this Bangladeshi national who got her citizenship the right way, it's senseless. It's a video you can never unwatch. Should not happen in this country. The men and women of HSI and ERO together in this building with our partners at FMPD responded, and we're very proud of them, but we're very sad at the same time that this had to happen. With that, I'll turn it back over to Fawad Kelly Walker.
That concludes our briefing. Open the floor up to questions.
Kelly, if I could just ask, could you clarify how he got into the country? He was smuggled in and he wasn't granted PTS. And then just to follow up with that, PTS has extreme vetting. Was he going through the vetting process?
So he arrived in the United States via a water vessel on August 6, 2022, in a maritime smuggling event. He was not granted temporary protective status until 2023, when he applied later in 2023, and then reapplied in 2024. So there was a vetting process that happens during that application window. But he did not actually have it until then. We released him in 2022 because of the prior administration's policies.
Question.
Yes.
Okay. On Monday, a Fort Myers Police Department officer said in court that Joaquin is considered a suspect in another case. Can you name what case that is?
I don't think we're talking about the ongoing investigation at this time.
When it comes to that immigration detainer that is placed on this man, how will that impact this case and possible justice to the victim's family?
Look, we're here to serve we're a law enforcement partner. We are here to serve the criminal justice system. We will work closely hand in hand with the state's attorneys to make sure that this individual meets the full due justice deserved to him, to include if he's turned over to us and before his final day in court and his sentencing, we'll make sure and coordinate that directly with the state system and take him once he's completed his time and make sure that he never gets to the streets of the United States and gets back to his home country.
So we won't be deported prior to any due process with this case?
If the state wants to keep him in the United States of America, we will absolutely work with them to do that.
This question is for Chief Fields. According to the arrest report, some of the Fort Myers police officers had encountered the suspect on March 24th, so before the incident. What was the nature of those interactions, and why was he not either arrested or detained then? Was there not probable cause or any kind of detainer that would have allowed for it?
So this is an active investigation, and we did have some contacts with him. over a period of time, but we're looking into those and looking at all those fine details on why we're in contact with him.
Was that contact to a prior case separate from this one?
I don't have that information right now, no.
Chief, can you confirm whether he is a suspect in any other cases at this point?
I cannot confirm, no.
We had heard that he had been to that location before and had some sort of, I guess dispute or confrontation regarding an ATM. He had gone in there. I don't know if this is true or not, but had he been there in the days before at that gas station?
These investigations are very fluid, and we look to vet every piece of information that we get, and we look to track down these rumors to make sure, through video, through witnesses. So I can't confirm anything at this time with that.
In the 4 years of the temporary protected status, what has the suspect been doing since then? Where has he been?
I don't know his whereabouts for the last 4 years, no.
Okay, last question.
If you can't confirm whether or not he's a suspect in another case, why would an officer stay in court Monday that he is?
I don't know. I'll have to look into it, though. We'll confirm that.
Okay. One last question. I'm sorry.
Okay, last one right here.
The DHS press release had mentioned that the TPS expired in 2024, and I was trying to just figure out the gap there between if that's the right date and sort of like where he was.
Right.
The time of his arrest.
So when TPS expires, although expired, they still have protection until there's a decision on their renewal application, which he filed timely. So he had protection up until the moment that the administration revoked his protection, which happened just this week. So he no longer has that available to him, and we'll do full justice at this time. Okay. And then I think that was the last question. Go ahead,
Yes,
Mike.
as a reminder, we'll show you the video as to why we're here today. All right, thank you. That concludes our press conference. Sir?
Meanwhile, an ICE program is helping victims of illegal crime, immigrant crime, to pursue justice while providing support in navigating the often unclear path for a victim when the accused perpetrator is in the country illegally. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has the details.
The Victim of Immigration Crime Engagement Office, which we call VOICE, exists for one reason: to ensure the victims of crime committed by aliens are not forgotten.
ICE Director Todd Lyons gives an update on the VOICE office 1 year after its relaunch. The program assists victims and their families who have been affected by crimes committed by illegal immigrants.
Because for too long, many of these people standing here with me have felt like they didn't have a voice.
Lyons was joined by family members of victims of murder and other crimes committed by people in the country illegally.
The love that she generously gave to everybody and the hope that she had for her future was erased by someone who had no right to be in this country.
Boss says that the VOICE program helped her and her family track the case and whereabouts of her daughter's perpetrator.
Normally, a victim doesn't have to wonder what's happening, where the perpetrator is, when the court dates are going to be. That's just not how it works with an illegal alien criminal. There's conflicting state and federal laws, and the path just is not clear.
Todd Lyons says there's been almost 900 calls to the VOICE program since its relaunch. 32% reported violent assault, 15% reported rape or sexual assault, and 9% homicide or manslaughter. The speakers thanked President Trump for reviving the program, as well as ICE for providing support in the difficult and often hard to navigate situations that victims of illegal immigrant crime and their families are in. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
Oil prices pulling back slightly today, but remaining elevated as tensions persist around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, stocks open higher than before, taking a slight dip. Top senators meeting with President Trump today. They're expected to discuss a Republican plan to go it alone on immigration enforcement funding because of Democrat opposition. More news after this.
Discover the ancient secret to vitality and longevity with Puretane Black Ginseng. Crafted from premium 6-year-old Korean ginseng, each root is carefully nurtured for over 2,260 days, undergoing a traditional 9-round handcrafted process of steaming and drying to unlock full potency and absorption. Experience pure, natural energy with Puretane Black Ginseng. Order now at puretang.com. The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It felt like an elephant pressing on my chest. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I was rushed into surgery where I received 2 stents in my arteries. Stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. I can enjoy life with my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Heart disease is America's #1 killer. And your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
And turning to energy, oil prices pulling back slightly today but remaining elevated as tensions persist around the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. crude briefly topped $100 a barrel before easing, while Brent also edged higher. Shipping through the vital route remains severely restricted, keeping markets on edge. The waterway is responsible for about 20% of global oil supply. Meanwhile, stocks opened higher. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ gained ground after March inflation came in largely as expected, despite pressure from the Iran conflict. The Dow, S&P 500, and NASDAQ all ticking up at the opening bell as investors weigh the stability of the ceasefire. All three indexes dipped slightly as of this afternoon. Inflation is heating up again, this time driven almost entirely by the war in Iran. The annual rate rising to 3.3% in March, the highest level since May 2024. That's according to a Bureau of Labor Statistics report issued today. It says the increase was almost totally driven by a spike in energy prices. Core inflation, which does not factor in food and energy prices, ticked up just slightly to 2.6% from 2.5%. That's still below expectations of 2.7%. The rise wasn't a surprise to analysts, but the key question now is whether these price pressures will stick in the months ahead. Tariffs 2.0. Democrat-led states and small businesses are back in the International Trade Court today. This time, they're challenging the president's global tariffs applied under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. President Trump turned to this provision after the Supreme Court ruled against his use of an emergency powers law. The plaintiffs are seeking to end the latest tariffs. A federal trade court in New York is hearing the oral arguments this morning. NTD's Arlene Richards explains.
Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years.
24 Democrat-led states and 2 small businesses are challenging the president's tariffs imposed under a different trade statute. In February, the Supreme Court ruled that an emergency power statute called IEPA doesn't authorize the president to impose sweeping tariffs. It stated that tariff authority under that statute was not clearly delegated to the president by Congress.
Wow. The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing.
After the ruling, the president immediately imposed temporary 10% global tariffs under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. He cited the nation's large, persistent, and serious balance of payments deficit as the reason for imposing the tariffs. Now, new plaintiff businesses represented by the same attorney in the previous case and the states on Friday will similarly argue that the president doesn't have authority under Section 122 either. They say in papers filed with the court that the U.S. is not facing large and serious international payment problems and that Section 122 was designed to address short-term balance of payments emergencies, not to impose sweeping tariffs. The Justice Department responded in its papers that Section 122 clearly delegates tariff authority to the president and argues that the president has done what the plaintiff's attorney repeatedly suggested in the previous tariff case. Furthermore, the president has complied with Section 122's amount and duration limitations, a maximum of 15% surcharge for up to 150 days. The plaintiffs have asked the Court of International Trade to decide the case as a matter of law and to pause the president's tariffs if the case moves through the courts. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Republican senators are set to meet with President Trump today to discuss the DHS funding stalemate amid a historic shutdown that's lasted over 50 days. NTD's Melania Trump reports.
Lawmakers out of town for recess amid the longest partial government shutdown in history. Today, top senators will meet with President Trump to discuss a path forward to fund the immigration enforcement aspect of the department without any Democrat votes. The Senate's number 2 Republican, Senator John Barrasso, told reporters yesterday, "We're going to have to go it alone because the Democrats aren't interested in funding national security at a time of increased concerns around the world." Barrasso saying the idea was to get it done quickly in a targeted way. President Trump wants the GOP-only bill by June 1st.
And I will answer President Trump's call to fund ICE and the Border Patrol by June 1st through reconciliation. I will lead this charge. We will give funding to ICE and Border Patrol without one Democratic vote because they will never give us their vote.
The DHS stalemate dragged on for more than 50 days. It started due to Democrat demands for changes to ICE policy.
I will vote no on any legislation that funds ICE until it is reined in and overhauled.
But now that Republicans are using a party line process to fund ICE, Democrats' reform demands will go unmet.
They got zero of that. So they wanted all these restrictions on law enforcement agencies, on ICE and CBP. They got none of that. They walked away from the table.
Today's meeting with the president comes as the House is expected to vote next week on a measure to fund the DHS without immigration enforcement. Some House Republicans have rejected the proposal. ICE was funded throughout the shutdown and will be for several years due to previous funding from the GOP's One Big Beautiful Bill. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melania Trump, NTD News.
Artemis II is headed home after its historic trip around the moon. As the 4 astronauts gear up for re-entry, the nation's lawmakers making a special call. Take a look.
Integrity Houston, good burn.
NASA's Artemis II mission is now halfway home as the crew prepares for a high-stakes return to Earth. But before re-entry, a rare moment of connection between deep space and Washington. Lawmakers speaking directly with the crew, praising a mission that's captured the world's attention.
I can only imagine the awe and wonderment you feel, but I want to just start by saying thank you. You are inspiring.
I can't even imagine how unbelievably proud your families are of you and how excited they are to see you soon and to welcome you back to Earth.
This mission has been unifying in so many ways.
For the astronauts, the journey has been deeply personal.
If I could have told that little girl who took home a picture of Earthrise and hung it in her room that she would eventually launch from that same place to see that same view, I'm pretty sure she would not believe it.
I just want to look at my daughters, Ellie and Katie, and just say I love you, and their support has been unbelievable. I don't think they knew what this mission really meant when we launched, but they have learned through the outpouring of public support.
And even as they reflect, they're already thinking about what comes next.
Part of our ethos as a crew and our values from the very beginning were that this is a relay race. In fact, we have batons that we bought to symbolize physically that. We plan to hand them to the next crew, and every single thing that we do is with them in mind.
After becoming the farthest traveling humans in history, the mission is entering its most dangerous phase, re-entry.
And we've reviewed all the systems, we've reviewed all the re-entry procedures and activities, and we are good to go.
Flight teams carefully tracking each step with almost no margin for error.
We've got about, less than a degree of angle that we need to hit. And, when we come in, we need to be right in the center of that.
Orion will slam into Earth's atmosphere at an extremely high speed. The heat from friction caused by the air will turn the capsule into a fireball as it hurtles toward the ocean.
The Orion spacecraft will enter the Earth's atmosphere at approximately 25,000 miles per hour. That heat shield, the thermal protection system, which is built by American hands and American factories for materials designed to withstand temperatures that approach the surface of the sun, will bear the full force of that reentry.
Even as engineers expressed confidence, there's no denying the tension heading into splashdown.
There's no question that we'll all be anxious, and but we'll be with the families. We'll be with them. We'll all be together. I have full confidence in the team. They do too.
Splashdown is scheduled for 8:07 p.m. Eastern off the coast of San Diego. The world will be watching with bated breath as the 4 history-making astronauts come home.
First Lady Melania Trump is pushing back against what she calls false smears linking her to Jeffrey Epstein, vowing legal action against those making the claims.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell.
The First Lady did not mention any specific allegations that were made, but said her name has never appeared in court documents, victim statements, or FBI interviews tied to the case. She is now calling on Congress to hold public hearings, allowing Epstein's victims to testify under oath and have their accounts entered into the official record. She says her legal team will continue pursuing action against what she describes as baseless and politically motivated claims. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expelled Spain from an international body monitoring Gaza. Netanyahu said Spain had defamed soldiers in the IDF. The group was created last year to monitor the Trump-brokered peace plan in Gaza. The group's work involves planning the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. Around 200 U.S. service members are working alongside the Israeli military and delegations from other countries. Netanyahu saying he wouldn't allow any country to wage a so-called diplomatic war against Israel without paying a price. Ukraine's president revealing that Ukrainian forces have been involved in shooting down Iranian drones in the Middle East. He says Russia also uses the same Iranian drones widely in its war against Ukraine. Zelensky hasn't specified which Middle Eastern countries hosted Ukrainian forces, but he says the developments were part of broader security arrangements. In return, Ukraine received support for protecting its energy infrastructure along with oil, diesel, and financial assistance. Zelensky saying Ukraine is strengthening security in the Middle East in exchange for strengthening its own resilience. Revelation comes amid growing concern that conflicts in the Middle East could divert Western military aid away from Ukraine. Russia is announcing a temporary ceasefire in its war with Ukraine set to coincide with the Orthodox Easter holiday. The Kremlin says it expects Ukraine to follow suit, calling for a pause in fighting through the weekend. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country will respond in kind, but remain cautious. Previous ceasefires have been marred by accusations of violations. Ukraine saying Russia committed hundreds of breaches on the first day last time round. Even as the pause is announced, fighting has continued. A Russian drone strike hitting port and energy infrastructure in Odessa overnight. A big legal blow for Meta Platforms. Massachusetts top court says the tech giant must answer claims it knowingly addicted teens. More news after this break. Don't go away.
Is deep-sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritan Green Vegetable Omega-3. Eat 2 a day and you'll feel brand new.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get 2 free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers, as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard My Pillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, there's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
I was a quarterback at Artemis High School. College first-round draft pick during the football season, I would stop eating. But I didn't know I was depressed. We didn't have any education behind what mental health was. I started to learn it starts here first. If this is together, I'll be better as a father and as a husband. We have to redefine what being a strong man is and heal, love your mind.
Former President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is challenging President Trump's sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, to a cage match. Hunter said that social media commentator and YouTube personality Andrew Callaghan pitched the idea.
Hey guys, Hunter Biden here. I just got a call from Andrew Callaghan. He asked me to come out on the Channel 5 Carnival Tour at the end of the month. I think we start in Phoenix and then we go to San Diego and we end in Albuquerque. And I think he's trying to organize a cage match, me versus Eric and Don Jr. I told him I'd do it, 100% in, if he can pull it off. And if he can't, I'm still coming.
The challenge lands against the backdrop of the nation's 250th independence celebrations. A professional UFC fight is already scheduled for June 14th at the White House. Trump first floated the idea of a White House UFC fight last July. UFC President Dana White, a close friend of Trump, is overseeing the June event. Meta Platforms is facing a lawsuit brought by the Massachusetts Attorney General. The suit accuses Meta of designing Instagram to be addictive for children. The Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled today that the lawsuit doesn't seek to hold Meta liable for content created by its users. However, the state's high court ruled that the suit instead targets the company's conduct. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell hailed the ruling. She called the decision a major step in holding social media companies accountable for fueling a youth mental health crisis. Meta has denied the allegations, arguing the company takes extensive steps to ensure its platforms are safe for teens and young people. 34 other states are pursuing similar cases against Meta in federal court. A federal judge is ordering the Pentagon to grant full access, press access that is, to the building. The ruling finding the War Department violating a prior court order. The New York Times sued the Department of War last year. The legal challenge centering around an ultimatum for reporters to sign an agreement not to seek unauthorized information from Pentagon employees or give up their press credentials. A district judge last month ruled in favor of the newspaper, calling the requirement unconstitutional. Following the ruling, the Pentagon made a new policy restoring press credentials to some reporters, but barring journalists from entering the Pentagon without an escort. The government said this policy didn't violate the judge's previous order. However, the Times sued again, arguing the new access limits were simply a workaround. A U.S. trade court is hearing a key case today weighing the legality of President Trump's 10% global import tariffs, which 24 states are challenging. We have more news after this break. Stay with us.
Absolutely perfection.
Hands down, the best show I've ever seen.
I almost cried like 8 times.
I don't think anybody realizes how good this show is until you actually get into the theater and see it.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted.
It fills the cup with joy.
Could not get enough of it.
You have to come see it.
It's a must-see. Must-see. Returns to David Koch Theater, March 25th through April 12th. Get your tickets at shenyun.com.
Hi, I'm Jane Seymour, and I spent years on TV playing a doctor. But I learned about the heartbreaking reality of heart disease and stroke when they touched my own life. My father nearly died before having a quadruple bypass and valve replacement that saved him. And my mom, who was my inspiration, suffered a stroke that took away her speech, her ability to move, and ultimately her life. To see someone so vibrant, so positive, who'd survived so much in life, be debilitated by a stroke, it was devastating, and also a wake-up call. And that's why I'm so passionate about supporting the American Heart Association. They're doing more every day to stop needless deaths. But they simply can't do their life-saving work without you. So please, call now or go to helpheart.org. And for only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, your donation will go to work to do amazing things, like fund the next medical breakthrough, get the next person trained in CPR, and the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I hope that you'll open your heart right now and join me. Please, call now or go to helpheart.org, give $19 a month, and we'll send you this special T-shirt that you can proudly wear to show that you're part of a community of monthly donors who are helping save lives. A healthy heart is the spirit of life. It makes it possible to do the things that you love, to spend time with your friends and family and fulfill your life's dreams. But so many won't have that chance. Heart disease is America's #1 killer and the #1 killer of women. And that's why I'll do whatever I can to make sure others don't die from heart disease before their time. So please join me. Call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Hey, boss. Okay.
I said I'm fine.
Me the bed, see you in the morning with the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it, and we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for you.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. A day ahead of a high-stakes summit in Pakistan, President Trump warning the Iranian regime to take negotiations seriously. The work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz continues. Iran is still holding the critical passage hostage, the steps President Trump is now taking. A Haitian national in the country illegally is charged with the brutal hammer murder of a Florida mother. Details ahead. A big legal blow from Meta Platforms. Massachusetts top court says the tech giant must answer claims in knowingly addicted teens. The Justice Department settles a social media censorship case that occurred during the Biden administration. Lawmakers speak to the Artemis II crew as they prepare to come home. What to expect as the Orion capsule attempts splashdown later today.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us. Vice President JD Vance is on his way to Pakistan for a high-stakes summit with Iran tomorrow. The talks will mark the highest-level meeting between the U.S. and Iranian officials since 1979. White House correspondent Mari Otsu is reporting live from the North Lawn ahead of this meeting. Mari, good afternoon. So what is the latest from President on Iran?
Hey, Don, good afternoon. That's right, and President Trump is now warning Tehran to take the peace talks tomorrow seriously or face further military action from the U.S. He told the New York Post this morning, quote, "We're loading up the ships." He's also taking to Truth Social to say, quote, "The Iranians don't seem to realize that they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate." And Don, this is coming just a day after President Trump says Iran is doing a, quote, "very poor job," some may even say a dishonorable, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz, saying that that was not the original agreement between the U.S. and Iran. He's also saying there are now reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait, warning that they must stop immediately. And here's Vice President Vance today on his way to Pakistan, where he'll be joined tomorrow by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for those negotiations. Take a look.
We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see, as the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The President has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
And Don, we have not seen President Trump publicly today, but he did tell the New York Post, quote, that this pause can be lifted at any time if he feels that the talks aren't going well. He says that we have a reset going. We're loading up the ships with the best ammunition, the best weapons we've ever made, saying that they're even better than what we did previously during Operation Epic Fury and that we blew them apart then. He says, quote, "If we don't have a deal, we'll be using them effectively, very effectively." And Don, we should see the president in a couple of hours when he heads to Charlottesville, Virginia for a MAGA Inc. roundtable and dinner tonight, and hopefully he'll take reporter questions on the way out. Back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett saying the Strait of Hormuz will be open within 2 months. Here he is on Fox Business this morning.
You think we can open the straits and get the flow of oil going within the next, say, 2 months?
Yes. So, I can't go into, classified stuff, but first, we're very, very hopeful. We've got the A team going to Pakistan to negotiate with the Iranians, and we also have backup plans if necessary.
Okay.
Hassett says removing the Iranian regime will make the world better off in the long run. He points to higher potential for economic growth and investment in the Gulf area once the threat of Iran is removed. He also says energy prices will drop once the Strait of Hormuz reopens, adding that about only 10% of the normal traffic is transiting through the waterway. Ship tracking data shows the strait seeing minimal traffic today. Between Wednesday and yesterday morning, only 7 ships passed through the strait, a fraction of the 140 ships that would pass normally. And the work to reopen the strait is ongoing. Iran is still holding the passage hostage. President Trump sending a warning to the regime while working on a solution with foreign leaders. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the latest on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz on Friday still seeing minimal traffic. Tracking data from marine traffic shows that almost no ships are passing through. Most vessels sailing through the strait are linked to Iran. Also on Friday, an Israeli intelligence official telling Fox News that Iran is charging a fee for ships to pass, saying the strait is effectively under full Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps control. They decide who gets to go through, but more importantly, who doesn't. This corresponds with a statement from President Trump made a day earlier, saying there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now.
Military and diplomatic strength.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying he spoke with President Trump on Thursday night about reopening the passage. Here's what they discussed.
We've been pulling together a coalition of countries, now over 30 countries, working on a political and diplomatic plan, but also looking at military capabilities and actually the logistics of actually moving vessels through the strait. So that was the focus of the discussion last night.
Prime Minister Starmer completing a trip to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, where they discussed reopening Hormuz and the current ceasefire. Starmer says him and the Gulf nations agreed on several points.
Strait of Hormuz has to be part of the solution, a very strong sense that there can't be tolling or restrictions on that navigation.
Britain's Foreign Secretary agrees, saying the Strait of Hormuz must be fully reopened without restrictions or tolls. The blocking of this vital waterway is hitting trade around the world. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
For comments on the latest on the Iran war, joining us now is Mike Leon, Director of Strategy, Free and Equal Elections Foundation, and host of Can We Please Talk podcast. And we have Tony Kinnett, national correspondent for the Daily Signal and host of Tony Kinnett Cast radio show and podcast. Good afternoon to you both. I'm looking forward to having this conversation on this issue with the both of you. So, Mike, I'll start with you this week. House Republicans blocking a Democratic attempt to pass a war powers resolution that would have limited or ended President Trump's military action in Iran. Let me get your thoughts on this. Wouldn't it be more dangerous at this point to limit President Trump's operation in Iran?
Well, first off, good to see you guys on this Friday afternoon. I think the framing of the question, Don, is a little interesting to me because Congress controls the purse strings if we're declaring war, right? I think we're all in agreement on that, right? I think Congress is in agreement on that. The question here is that we were not currently at war with Iran. To quote Secretary Kerry, who formerly worked in the Obama administration, I don't know if people saw his recent interview on MS Now with Jen Psaki, he said other presidents have been asked to do what Israel asked President Trump to do. President Trump was the only one to do it. So if we're going by that rationale in terms of us militarily intervening in this, whether it be on our own behalf and American interests or on the behalf of Israel, we started a war to President Trump's own words. So if we're using those words, Congress should then be able to rein in what we're militarily spending on said war. So again, the framing of your question, Don, I get it because we're a little bit past that point right now. So how can Congress rein it in? I think that's what Democrats' argument is, just speaking with some House Democrats that want that. They want to rein in what we are spending here because, again, we were not technically attacked. We started this or were asked to start this with the New York Times reporting that Bibi Netanyahu was in the Situation Room, which has caused some ire from both the left and the right that the Israeli prime minister would ask the U.S. to do such action. So I get your question, but I think it's framed wrong because yeah, we are past the point of no return from that, but Congress should have been briefed on all of this in order to get the approval to do some of these things. So I do agree on that point.
Okay, so Tony, did President Trump need authority from Congress to start this operation?
Did he need authority from Congress to start the operation? Well, according to the War Powers Resolution Act itself, no, but this is something that's broken. And I think that rather than, Mike and I come from probably different places on the matter of whether or not the strike was necessary and who instigated the strike and those kind of things, I think probably the better case to be made here is that Congress has abdicated a lot of its duty, things that it's supposed to do, and has given both the presidential and then in its opposite, the judicial branch, way more power than either of those two branches were ever meant to hold. And so now that we are in the midst of this kind of a thing, you have Democrats in the House who are openly cheering on Iran, which is bizarre. You have members of the fringe right, which are also doing the same. It's bizarre. And the War Powers Resolution Act is not actually meant to say, hey, we'd like some oversight here. We'd like to retake our authority and govern in the way the Constitution outlined. And instead, what you have is we're really mad that the cameras aren't on us and we can't get out and priss and preen in front of the American people in the world. And I think that that's, again, it's political theater in a place that it doesn't belong, not that necessarily it belongs anywhere. And when I say that, I mean that Congress, again, going out and doing their nonsense little videos over this kind of thing, they're not actually doing anything effectively that merits the idea that, man, I really want to see Congress take over with this. The reason Congress wasn't brought up to speed in its entirety before this operation carried out is because they leak like a colander. And you can't have that. I mean, that puts American troops at risk before any operation. If Congress, Rashida Tlaib's going to blab, that's not going to be good for anyone.
Okay, Mike, do you have a response?
No, I'm kind of in lockstep with Tony. I think the framing needs to change. Like the three branches are supposed to be checkers on each other, and the legislative has not been checking either, or at least to what Tony and I would both want the other sides in this proverbial, let's say, argument, for lack of a better term, to do in terms of checking and adding to the checks and balances that the three of them are supposed to have on each other. So I do agree on that point. I also think it's being framed differently right now. Back to what I said originally, right? Like the War Powers Act, to Tony's point, there's some ambiguity within there of what the president can and can't do, which has caused the ambiguity from Congress's point of view about whether or not this is a war/military operations. That's why you've seen the careful language and wording sometimes fragmented from not only what you hear from the White House press secretary to what you hear from the Pentagon to what you hear from the president. So there's ambiguity in all of it, but I do agree with Tony's overarching point that there's some political theater when there shouldn't be, and there should be more of a check from the legislative on the other two branches.
Okay, let's talk about the current state of affairs. We're past what should have the president done at the beginning of this. So let's talk about what's happening now. Tony, can I get your reaction to what Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said a couple of days ago before the deadline, Trump's deadline? She said, to every individual in the president's chain of command, you have a duty to refuse illegal orders. That includes carrying out this threat. Is this something that she should have said?
I think it's just political theater. I mean, should she have said it? Well, I mean, if the goal is rallying the base and, getting everyone excited that she's fighting, she's brave, she's stunning, well, then sure. But the right does this as well. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and take any high horse here and say that, she shouldn't have said this. It's just as silly as when the senators on the Democrat side of the aisle did this a couple of months ago regarding the striking of narco boats in the Eastern Pacific and then, of course, in the Southern Caribbean. So, I mean, it's really silly. We do this every couple of days. There's a major, Trump's going to nuke and all of Iranian civilization is going to be gone. While in the latter part of the post, he said, God bless the people of Iran, clearly talking about the regime. But if we latch onto one word, we can get a lot of clicks and a lot of videos and a lot of grandstanding out of it. I also think it's a little disingenuous to start bringing up 25th Amendment nonsense and refusing order stuff after the previous administration. This is why maintaining those consistent standards is important, because when you need people to take you seriously as a kind of an impartial voice coming into the room echoing concern, if you've just covered up for goofiness, well, then you're not going to be taken very seriously. Others are going to point out the last time that you covered up for it and not take you seriously. And Republicans are finding this out right now in regard to earlier promises made that maybe haven't been kept. And so this is should she have said it? No. But is that going to do anything? No, because it's kind of what's expected at this point.
So, Mike, she also called on impeachment actions to remove President Trump from office. What is your reaction to that?
Yeah, so let me piggyback on something Tony said there. Look, I was having this conversation with a progressive influencer just yesterday, right? If my boss at, let's say, my day job, tweeted out, all of you are losing your jobs later today, and I'm going to blow up the building where we work at. Oh, by the way, God bless everybody who works here. I think I would interpret the first part of it and not care as much about the second part of the message. And my big thing is that while I do agree we can't hang on every Trump tweet and true social bomb post, whatever it's called, I agree with that. We shouldn't run to it, make graphics, and then have panel discussions on it. But I do think that the CEO of the free world, the leader of the United States, posting on a social media platform his plans. And then inside White House press briefings, he says, I mean what I say. I don't kid. In 2020, he said this during the pandemic. I don't kid. Why are you asking Kayleigh McEnerney? I'm the president of the United States. So am I taking his words at face value, or am I not taking his words at face value? So how it ties into AOC, I agree with Tony about the political theater. A tweet does absolutely nothing, for sure. But she's got to get the message out somehow, right? He's putting it out on Twitter or in Truth Social. So why not, combat, a checker on a checker, as they like to say. But I think at the end of the day, if the leader of the free world is posting something message-wise on social media, whether or not it's a threat or it's thinly veiled, it's not going to be executed. Something like that to call for the end of a civilization. I don't like hey, the house is not burning yet because I don't see any flames. A lot of smoke is coming from it. And the guy told you that he went in there with matches and candles, right? So we have to start disassociating or calling out people that are saying these type of things about the messages he posts, because he is posting them, whether he's using it as a bargaining or negotiating ploy to get Iran to come to the table, whether he's talking about the regime. I get all that, but other people don't get all that. And we would interpret Kim Jong-un posting something like that about the United States as a threat to the homeland. So it has to be treated as such. And I think I agree with Tony's point about AOC tweets don't do anything, right? I agree with that. But at the same time, I don't want to see the leader of the free world tweeting something like that when we're about to send JD Vance and Steve Witkoff over there to try to negotiate with Pakistan, which, by the way, we were negotiating already through Oman in February for all of this before the attacks happened. So I want people to understand that. We were doing talks already until the war started, and now we're back in the same place. And I think a tweet from the President of the United States saying that doesn't truly help in all of this. So,
Tony, the White House press secretary likened that or a reporter asked the White House press secretary who likened this statement to Iran calling for death to America and asking the question, how are the two statements different?
I mean, well, so again, the answer would be the president's statements consistently, again, over and over and over and over again. If I'm expressing, something is stressful at a job, and then at the end of the day, I say, you know what, this is killing me. Clearly, I'm not actually suggesting that this is going to put me in a hospital bed. The president is sarcastic. He's bombastic. I do disagree with Mike that there's a lot of people who don't know this about Trump. Guys, come on. This is now year 12 of President Trump in around the American public life, or year 11, I suppose. And of course, he was active before then. I'm not buying much of the outrage. Yes, the Iranian parliament has consistently chanted death to America. They just killed 35,000 of their own people. And then after the Trump administration said, hey, you better negotiate, you better make a deal, you better make it something that we want. And then they said no, and they walked away. Then the strikes happened. And we were telegraphing that punch for months. Hey, if you don't play by the game and the rule that we set, because we are the United States, we are going to punish your military and the regime for it. And they said, no, we don't believe you. And so then the United States said, okay, check it out. Here's the straight flush. They put it right out in front. There you go, right in front of you. And now the Iranian regime has said, oh, we're kind of interested in doing a little bit of negotiation again. We'll see. If they play by things, they actually kind of let things down instead of sending them the pallet loads of cash and unfrozen assets. The United Kingdom is currently playing pancake, trying to flip back and forth between positions. Keir Starmer in front of the press and then in front of podcasters. It's a bizarre strategy. I definitely agree with Mike. It's bizarre seeing the president talk about this way, or to talk about things this way, of course. But this would be the coroner. We've had years of American leaders who have said really kind, calm, stately things in front of the public and then go behind closed doors and do wild stuff. Not the noun I would use, but again, we are on air at the moment. So I think that American people put him in office partly because, as the coroner, this fake diplomatic stateliness of the office is only as good as the actions behind them. And as much as I like to say, wow, this is really big and huge, although I don't like it, I would be lying if I said I did. I can't really feign maybe surprise as much. I get your point, though.
Okay, so Mike, let me ask you this. President Trump has said the Iranian people are willing to endure these bombings for freedom. He said this, and I've actually talked to people who have close connections to Iranian people. Currently, living in Iran who want Trump to continue these bombings, continue bombing Iran. So what are your reactions to that?
Yeah, and my former attorney that I went to college with is Iranian. I've spoken to her about this because she still has family that lives over there. I think this is akin to like Venezuela, or you can even ask me about Cuba. Like my aunt lives in Cuba. How do I feel about Cuba if something like this were to happen and we were to try to do regime change of Diaz-Canel in Cuba? Same thing when I talk to Venezuelans that are in Miami, right? You're always going to find people that are happy about it because their current way of life is not, there's a reason why they're trying to flee those countries to eventually come to an America and start a new life. But then there's also the flip side of what we've seen from these attacks throughout the region. And we haven't even talked about Lebanon, but like as well in Iran, there's been some strikes and I know some US mistakes, but that doesn't bring back people who have lost their lives in all this. So I wouldn't agree with the president's statements. I would agree with the sentiments of the people that live there that know that the Iranian regime is bad for them. Just look at what happened with Mahsa Amini and the Women Life Freedom movement that happened years ago. And we recently saw something, I think just as of 8 or 9 months ago, where there were protests on the street. So we have known that the Iranian people want a change in their lives. They want a change in leadership from the Ayatollah on down. We haven't accomplished that though, folks. And that's the problem. We are kind of in the same scenario where we were before, which is why no US president has done this before. No US president has taken this step. And I get it. Look, I get the Obama deal had a little bit of things you can poke holes into. It would have expired in 2023, just as an example. And we have to think about who are the good faith brokers in the region that can help us with this, right? Pakistan has come to the forefront now. I mentioned Oman before. We've seen some other players in the region that have tried to intervene or at least intermediate. We also saw the president of the United States just last year on a viral video of mine. Shout out to me for doing it, but shout out to President Trump for making it as he was walking onto a helicopter saying, they don't know what the F they're doing, right? And so we have all of that as the background, and we are in the same position that we are in months later after an attack and the war that has started in Iran. And we've lost U.S. Marine life. We almost lost 2 pilots' lives as well. Thank God we rescued those pilots. And we've seen thousands of people killed in the region. And all we've taken out is the Ayatollah, and his son is still controlling, and the IRGC is still standing up. And now we have the Strait of Hormuz, which is choking 20% of the world's oil. Like, we are in the same spot, just billions more lost and lives lost. Well, how are we not? True. And this is not meant to be argumentative. Okay, how are we not
seriously.
Don, may I? Tony, please.
So we're not in the same position, first of all, because the Iranian Navy has been obliterated yet again, third time in history at the bottom of the Persian Gulf and the Strait. We see their Air Force completely reduced and gone. We see hundreds of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps leaders, which are now dead. Border regions, all the way from Khuzestan over to the eastern provinces, are up in revolt. We have the Kurds, which are currently going through gun running operations to the civilians in Iran. We see not just the Al-Khamenei, but a ton of the senior leadership. Over 58 of the top senior officials, including all but like 2 of their nuclear scientists, the guys who know how to enrich the uranium, are dead. They are gone. And as for the thousands dead are not thousands dead from the Gulf states around the region. By the way, the United Arab Emirates, which has carried out a strike, again, I have to say allegedly because they haven't admitted to it yet, but with their own 2000-9 Mirage jets onto Iranian islands. We see the Gulf states cooperating with Israel for the first time in this manner in history. It's the Abraham Accords come to life. We see the United States confirming a direct link, by the Iranians' own words, on Hezbollah and claiming it as a direct Iranian group, which means that Iran is now admitting to directly killing United States Marines officially and clearly as a direct state act of war. They have admitted to several other acts of war that we now have diplomatic and clear casus belli for. This is some place that we have never truly been before. And yes, now the Prime Minister of Pakistan slamming his own Defense Department officials because they are insulting Israel and the United States throughout these negotiations. The entire balance of power is shifting. And I think that is a crucial difference from where we are when they said, no, we have Russian and Chinese anti-air. We're untouchable. That they had that perspective a couple of months ago. And then that was found to be utterly untrue. So it's a totally different ballgame. Even if I don't even like where things are right now, I think, I'd love for the gun running to have gone much faster than it has. That's, the problem of modern communication. But to say that we're in the same spot or even colloquial close to the same spot, I'm not seeing it.
So, Mike, maybe you can elaborate a bit further on what you mean by we're in the same spot. Maybe you're talking about the ideology of the Iranian regime that is still persisting.
Yeah, part of that. We're in the same spot in that we now have NATO allies that don't want to help us in any of sense of this because a NATO country was not attacked in this. We have billions of dollars that have been spent on the war. We have the Strait of Hormuz is closed. It was open prior to. We have now, like I said, thousands that have died, some women and children that have died with respect to these strikes in Beirut, with respect to Lebanon, obviously in Iran, all throughout the region. Well, so when I say we're in the same spot, probably worse, I get Tony's point now, but if we've decimated a Navy and we've obliterated the majority of their ability to create a nuclear bomb, why are we sending the vice president and Steve to negotiate with somebody who's been obliterated? And I don't mean this as I'm being serious. I don't mean this as an adversarial or argumentative point. It's meant to say, you just told me, and not you, Tony, I'm talking about administration now. You just told me they've been obliterated, they've been wiped out, the war will be over in a couple days. The war is not over in a couple days.
Weeks.
They have a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, which is controlling 20% of the world's oil and gas. And now we're going to negotiate with them, and we're miles apart, gap-wise, on sanctions, on the nuclear program, on the Strait, on U.S. military presence throughout the region, on inspections and oversight, things that they were doing prior to under the JPCOA. And again, I know the deal would have expired in 2023. So there were things that we were already doing that didn't need to advance to this stage. So when I say we're in the same spot, I kind of mean it, Don, in the sense of like, there's a famous Fresh Prince of Bel-Air episode where they get lost in the woods and then they make a big circle and they come back and they find some of the same items and they're like, we know where we are. And it's like, no, we're in the same spot. Like in terms of we've just lost more money though and life. And now we're still negotiating with people who we all agree are state sponsors of terror, but we're negotiating with them, but we're being told that they've been obliterated, decimated, and that they're at their lowest point. So that's what I mean. Like we're in the same spot. There's been no regime change and no freedom for the people of Iran. We're in the same spot. That's what I feel.
The answer to this would be Japan.
Okay, at the beginning of this operation, President Trump laid out his objectives to deprive Iran of the ability to make a nuclear weapon. And a case can be made that from this point on, it would be very difficult for Iran to make a nuclear weapon. So if we're talking about if we're in the same spot, Tony, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, I would say that is a key pillar. Obviously, their ballistic missile production, obviously what it is that they do in their ability to open and close the Strait of Hormuz at will. That's something that the other Gulf states have had an issue with. And for the president saying that there are things that we wanted out of this war from our perspective and their inability to carry out some of those things, that is true. A large amount of that has either been, again, depending on the program, set back quite a long time or completely destroyed. But again, when we look at the history, if the idea of victory is that the enemy power has to have every soldier dead, every leader dead and eliminated, well, then no war in all of human history has ever been won. And there were several times that the United States made attempts to basically let Japan say uncle when the Marines were wiping them off of every single island in the Pacific. And eventually, the United States used a harder measure with the tools that we had at the time to prevent what would have been an extremely costly mainland invasion of Japan. And I think that what the Trump administration is doing currently is giving them another off-ramp. It's not a circle, but it's saying, hey, we are on an interstate to you being in a very serious world of hurt. President Pez Dispenser, whatever, I can't pronounce his name, he's not very friendly with the IRGC. You remember, they've just been held at gunpoint to appoint the one-legged homosexual Mojtaba Khomeini as the new supreme leader who still no one has seen. There's some internal strife there. It appears, based on the diplomatic cables that we're getting out of the region, these are off-ramps rather than kind of returning to the same place, kind of in a circle, I guess, would be my answer that way.
Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your guys' time. I'll just ask one more question to each of you. So, Mike, do you agree with the statement Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If you agree, what do we do about it?
Well, first off, I do agree. Second, I'm not a geopolitics expert. I rely on foreign experts out there, folks that have worked in the diplomacy phase, but also folks that have worked in military operations. The one thing, the common through line in all of this, Don, that I hear is that this is hard. It's not easy. You can nitpick at every single execution or policy, or like I said, from the JPCOA to actually Trump doing something that no president has done, which is obviously levy these strikes on Iran. So we can nitpick all we want. I've had people that are Democrat leaning that have worked at former administrations that said, can't believe he did it. And I'm actually kind of happy he did it. So I agree with Tony's point on that. But I do agree with the overarching statement, Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. We were on that path with respect to the IAEA and the independent inspections and the access that they had and the uranium enrichment and the percentage that they could get to in a previous deal. And that's what I keep coming back to, because again, I am not an expert on it, and I rely on the people that have worked in it, have worked on it, or have covered it for years and what they've told me. So this is an accumulation of all of that information to say, yes, we did have to do something about it. Maybe not as drastic as a measure as President Trump took, but we did have something in place that at least would have gotten us to a certain point, and we wouldn't have gotten here. Now we're here, point of no return, like you've mentioned, Don, like we've been talking about. Now what do we do about it, right? Because how do we rein back President Trump? How do we not carry out further military operations? How do we not get past to the point of what he tweeted out, which could, to Tony's point, lead us to Japan? Do I ever think we'll get there? No, of course not. I think it's hyperbole, but we don't want to get on that road. So how do we rein it back in? How do we do it? I don't know how to do that, but I do know we had framework in place prior. Let's hope that the trip by JD Vance and Steve Witkoff, when they go out there with Pakistan and they negotiate this, there is something that comes out of these two different 10, 15-point plans that we could kind of bridge together to have some type of long-term solution.
Okay, Tony, final thoughts.
I think that I would never suggest that anybody like Mike would be in favor of the idea of Iran obtaining any kind of a nuclear weapon or fissile material. I think a lot of the critics of the war are critical from a lot of our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan. And that has to be taken into effect. And that's why one of the things I tell my audience is that it's perfectly fine to have questions, and you should have questions. And that is absolutely why Congress should care enough to actually be big boys and girls and not leak things to the media for attention, but do their job and actually become experts on the committees to which they sit. Whether you be a Republican, whether you're Lauren Boebert, whether you're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whether you're Rashida Tlaib, Brandon Gill, I don't care. You should know what you're talking about. That said, I will say this regarding the kind of pathway that we were on. When Iran was under the JCPOA, they would bring in members from the international atomic agencies and sit them in essentially fake facilities and hand them the exact same barely enriched uranium and say, oh, this is what we've been working on. And then we would see radiation spikes from elsewhere in the country that were suggesting up to 20, 30, 40, 50% enrichment. And that means it's a failure. I mean, if my kid is lying to me and they say they're not eating cookies and they keep coming out covered in cookie crumbs, at some point, something does need to be done. And it is hard. And oftentimes chemotherapy is really painful. You know what else is really, really painful? Stage 4 cancer. And I make that example because American people really don't like taking action on the future. We all like to say we're future facing. We're making plans for the future. No, we're not. We're an instant gratification society. And some of that does suck. Now, what's the answer to that? Well, that's a cultural change, not a political one. And so I don't know if that's really for me to answer, at least here on this program.
Okay, great conversation, as always. Let's leave it there for today. Thank you very much, Tony. Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you both.
Thanks, guys.
Lawmakers speak to the Artemis II crew as they prepare to come home. What to expect as the Orion capsule attempts to splash down today later. We have more news after this break.
The bladder control aisle. You won't shop here again. Your private business is your own. The constant struggle is over. Now there's a better way. It's HDIS. We home deliver bladder control products. We understand how you feel. For over 25 years, we've home delivered to many of the 20 million Americans who deal with incontinence. We offer all brands. We pay shipping and use plain, unmarked boxes. If we can help you or someone you care for, call for your free product sample pack and $45 in money-saving coupons. Our counselors will help you choose the right product. And unlike stores, we're always in stock. You'll get what you need. Satisfaction guaranteed. HDIS, the better way.
For your free sample pack with your free catalog, $45 in money-saving coupons, and free product samples, call 1-800-701-6159. That's 1-800-701-6159.
I was a young dad of 3 amazing kids. I was finally following my dreams. Just when you feel like life is starting to come together, you get kind of hit in the face. I was born with a congenital heart defect and had open heart surgery as a kid. I was supposed to go to the heart doctor once a year, and I finally went. He listened to my heart, and I'll never forget, he sat back and he said, yeah, it's time for open heart surgery, or you risk your aorta rupturing, and that's it. I was scared out of my mind. The night before my open heart surgery, I made a goodbye video for my kids. Be strong. Take care of your mom. I love you guys.
Seeing, all the kids hug him goodbye and hoping that they were going to be able to hug him again.
I love you. But I did make it, thanks to the work of the American Heart Association. So that's why I'm asking you to join me. Please call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help get the next person trained in CPR, get the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care, as well as fund the next medical breakthrough like these heart valves that helped save my life. When you give $19 a month with your credit card, we'll send you this special t-shirt to show you're a part of our community of monthly donors.
I'm most grateful that I get to have a husband that I get to grow old with, and a husband that gets to be there for his children.
I believe without the American Heart Association, I would not be here today. If this can happen to me, it can happen to you, it can happen to anybody. Your donation can literally help save a life. Please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now to become a monthly donor.
A Haitian national accused of attacking a woman with a hammer to cause her death outside a Florida gas station last week will face deportation. The Homeland Department says the individual illegally entered the United States in 2022, but was granted temporary status under the Biden administration.
Temporary protective status was never designed to be a permanent stay in the United States, but for decades it's been abused as a de facto amnesty program. As we have ended TPS, the courts have obstructed the administration from restoring integrity to our immigration system. On March 11th, the Trump administration and the Supreme Court asked the Supreme Court to clear the way for it to end TPS for more than 350,000 Haitian immigrants. The case that occurred here in Fort Myers highlights the president's objective to restore law and order to our country and enforce immigration laws enacted by Congress.
The Obama administration first granted a temporary protected status designation to Haiti in 2010 after the country was hit by a devastating earthquake. TPS allows individuals from countries affected by armed conflict, natural disasters, or other extraordinary events to remain in the U.S. on a temporary basis. Under President Trump, the Department of Homeland Security has taken steps to end TPS for about a dozen countries. The Supreme Court is expected to hear the case this month. And turning to energy, oil prices pulling back slightly today, but remaining elevated as tensions persist around the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. crude briefly topped $100 a barrel before easing, while Brent also edged higher. Shipping through the vital route remains severely restricted, keeping markets on edge. The waterway is responsible for about 20% of global oil supply. Meanwhile, stocks opened higher. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq gained ground after March inflation came in largely as expected, despite pressure from the Iran conflict. The Dow, S&P, and Nasdaq all ticking up at the opening bell as investors weigh the stability of the ceasefire. All three indexes dipped slightly as of this afternoon. Israel has agreed to negotiate with Lebanon while continuing strikes on Hezbollah, saying those operations are outside the Iran ceasefire framework. And Israel's military releasing a video today showcasing its chief of staff inside southern Lebanon. He told troops the army is not in a ceasefire and will continue to fight on this front.
This is Lebanon. This is against Hezbollah. Here we are active, employing many means and many of our capabilities. The achievements of this war so far are historic.
General Zamir stressed that despite a ceasefire in Iran, fighting there could resume at any moment and with great intensity. Also today, the IDF posting that more than 250 artillery fighters from the Hezbollah terrorist group were killed, and more than 200 Hezbollah rocket launchers and around 1,300 launch tubes have been dismantled. The latest war between Israel and the Lebanon-based terror group Hezbollah began on March 2nd, when the Iran-backed group fired rockets towards Israel. President Trump saying he's ready to strike Iran again if peace talks fail in Pakistan. The president telling the New York Post that U.S. warships are being reloaded. This comes as Vice President JD Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are heading to Pakistan to negotiate a peace deal. Trump says we'll find out if the talks are successful in about 24 hours. The president tells the New York Post that U.S. warships are reloaded with the best weapons ever made, and if Iran can't reach a deal, he will be using them. Trump also suggesting that the Iranian regime is being untruthful. The president posting on Truth Social today, quote, "The Iranians don't seem to realize they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by using international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate." Just yesterday, he also criticized the Iranian regime for how they're not allowing free passage through the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting this may be against the ceasefire agreement. Pakistan is getting ready for its Iran peace talks. It's welcoming all delegates and journalists from participating nations traveling to Islamabad. It says all airlines are requested or required to permit boarding to those attending the event, even without a visa. Immigration authorities in Pakistan will issue them visas upon arrival. Pakistani authorities locking down the capital city ahead of the high-stakes talks between the U.S. and Iran tomorrow. Additional troops and police are being deployed across the city, with checkpoints set up at major roadways. Vice President JD Vance has departed for Islamabad for the negotiations, while an Iranian delegation is also expected there. Here's Vance speaking just before leaving Washington for Pakistan.
Hey guys, good morning. Thanks for coming. Look, we're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see. As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The president has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see. So I hope you guys have a safe flight. We'll certainly take some questions later on. But for now, let's get on the plane and hit the road. Thank you all.
Tomorrow's talks are expected to focus on extending the ceasefire beyond the current 2 weeks and easing regional tensions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expelled Spain from an international body monitoring Gaza. Netanyahu said Spain had defamed soldiers in the IDF. The group was created last year to monitor the Trump-brokered peace plan in Gaza. The group's work involves planning the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. Around 200 U.S. service members are working alongside the Israeli military and delegations from other countries. Netanyahu saying he wouldn't allow any country to wage a so-called diplomatic war against Israel without paying a price. The crew of NASA's Artemis II mission is preparing for a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Joining us now is Art Harmon, space policy expert and president of the Coalition to Save Manned Space Exploration. Art, good afternoon. So good to have you here today. So it's going to be one of the dangerous parts of this mission, re-entry, that is. Now, I have a vague understanding of why that is, a very crude understanding. I'm wondering if you can help me paint a clearer picture, the details of why specifically this is the reason.
Well, thanks so much, and a pleasure to be with you. This is indeed the most potentially dangerous part of the entire mission, and it comes down to 3 years ago on Artemis I. That was very successful. It had no crew on it, unmanned, so it went around the moon and came back successfully. But afterwards, they discovered some damage to the heat shield. And the heat shield's maybe a foot thick, and it's materials that are designed to protect the astronauts within from 3,000-degree heat. And because of that, there's concern that that could burn through. Now, what NASA has done is they've redone the way that the spacecraft will re-enter the Earth's atmosphere a little bit, just a little bit, kind of do a little skip off the upper atmosphere to bleed off some speed, and then it'll do its descent. And they believe that this will lighten the thermal loading, if you will, on the spacecraft sufficiently that it'll keep them completely out of the danger zone, and that after about 7 minutes of being without communication, because there's always this plasma around the spacecraft that prevents radio transmission, so that we're expecting she'll come through just fine. The parachutes will deploy. She'll splash down in the Pacific Ocean.
So you talk about the heat shield being able to withstand immense heat. I'm just so fascinated with the technology here. You know, it's amazing to me how mankind has figured out how to send people to space and back again. Can you just talk a little bit more about this technology or the equipment that ensures safe reentry?
Well, it's the sort of the scientific term for it is ablation. So it's something that it's got ceramic and other materials in it, and it'll kind of flake off, and in so doing, dissipate heat. And we've used essentially the same material since Mercury, since the very first astronaut, Alan Shepard, went into space in 1961. And now this is the biggest manned crewed spacecraft that we've launched to this date, other than the Space Shuttle. So the Space Shuttle had its entire underside with these black thermal tiles. They're ceramic, and did a beautiful job of protecting the spacecraft. This is just a little bit different than Apollo and a lot bigger spacecraft.
So what have the astronauts and their bodies experienced during this mission, and what are they going to experience during re-entry as well?
Well, you know, it's quite an amusement park ride, if you will, because when they take off, they're getting maybe 3.5 Gs. So imagine your body weighing 3 times its normal weight. You know, your arm suddenly weighs, you know, maybe 60, 80 pounds and things like that. Your head's weighing the same. Then all of a sudden, the rocket engines cut off when you get to orbit, and you're weightless. And you can move around and float like you've probably seen in videos. And it's, you know, every astronaut I've talked to, they said they always get a great big smile when they talk about being weightless. And now when they're returning to Earth, they're going to experience up to about 4 Gs, 4 times their weight. So people, you know, if you've got let's just say a 200-pound man, he's going to weigh 800 pounds just for a few minutes. But they're used to it. They've done testing like that. They've probably flown in fighter jets to experience that. So it's not a surprise. And in fact, you'll talk to them and they'll say that was really cool.
That is so interesting. Now that you lay it out for us, so the astronauts in this mission, they're in space for a few days. But I'm wondering, for those astronauts who are in space long term, like let's say for months, what happens to their body when there's no gravity?
Now, that's a very good question, and also a question for people who will be living on the moon and eventually Mars, because our body is very incredibly designed to get rid of what it doesn't need. And that's very useful for, when you're out in the desert starving and you're, lost in the woods. The body will say, I'm going to get rid of all this piece of muscle and bone that you're not using. just to keep the core of you alive. So that's how our bodies are designed. So what happens is they'll lose about half of their, up to maybe half of their bone and muscle mass. So they'll come back so weak, but after 6 months and especially after a year, that they can barely walk. And then it'll take them about as long as they were up in space of daily exercises and rehab to regain their strength, their bone and their muscle mass. But it's also a fascinating test bed, because when our astronauts are on the space station and losing that much bone and muscle mass, well, that's a beautiful medical opportunity to be able to learn, more about that process, so that as we age, we'll have better remedies for losing muscle mass that we don't want to lose.
Okay, so I noticed you said people living on the moon and potentially on other planets. That's a very interesting thought, because there's talk about a lunar base. Maybe you can talk to us about this. What is the purpose of this lunar base in the future? Is it going to be a launch pad for going to other planets?
Oh, it certainly is. Yes. To go to Mars, it's a 6 to 9 month journey, and if you either come back immediately or you stay 26 months to come back. So you can't just go home if something happens catastrophic, or you get claustrophobic and you have to go back because you can't stand it. So you want to learn how to live on another world on the moon, where it's 3 days to home if something goes wrong, and you will learn all of the physiological effects of living not in zero gravity like on the space station, but in 1/6 gravity there, about 1/4 gravity on Mars. So we'll learn a lot of lessons that we need to learn before we go to Mars, and we'll learn them on the moon, which is a much closer and safer place to learn those lessons.
Okay, so Art, I have a couple more general questions. For example, can you explain how is the U.S. faring in the space race right now compared to other countries?
We're in a brutal space race with China. Russia is no longer a real player. They have trouble just keeping their Soyuz going and so forth. They have sort of pretend plans to build a space station. I don't know if it'll pan out. But China has already tested all of the components of their moon rocket, including the lander that we're actually behind on that. So China has already declared that they view the moon and Mars and orbital space just like the way they do the South China Sea, in violation of 400 years of freedom of the seas and the Law of the Sea Treaty. They don't care. So we do want to try to beat China, if at all possible, to the moon. When we land, again, of course, after 50-some years, when we land in 2028. And that will help restrain China from their worst instincts to say, yeah, you want rare earth minerals, you want a war in Taiwan, you're not going to the moon. Now, they may have pulled that stunt on Obama, but Trump would have just said, yeah, some expletive, we're doing it anyway. So we do need to beat China. We need to establish a permanent presence, and that's one of the reasons for having a permanent base on the moon, which, like the space station, would probably have 6-month incremental stays. So we would do a lot of research and exploration, and yes, tourism will be a huge thing. Now, there's minerals, and there's helium-3, which is useful for nuclear fusion, but there will be tourism, and in 15 years, maybe even sooner, for the price of a luxury cruise today, you'll be able to go to orbit around the Earth, and for 2 or 3 times that, you'll be able to go to the moon and put your own boot print on the surface of the moon, just like Neil Armstrong's giant leap.
Wow, it really seems like a future that is almost upon us, and it's very exciting. But I want to pull on one last string from what you said. You brought up President Trump. What has the president done so far? And this is the last question here. What has he done so far for the U.S. space program?
Well, President Trump, in his first term, he rescued the return to the moon. Obama had killed it. He thought it was American exceptionalism. He thought it was a Bush project. The Chinese bullied him, who knows what, or probably all three of those. And so he killed the return to the moon and invented some stuff to pretend that he hadn't killed the space program. So with that as background, we do need to get back to the moon. Trump rescued it in 2017. Biden didn't kill it, but he didn't accelerate it. And now, with President Trump in his second term and Jared Isaacman as the NASA administrator is doing a great job, we're accelerating it as fast as possible. Next year, we'll be going to orbit around the Earth to test out the lunar landers. We'll dock with them, and then and that'll be the test of that, kind of like Apollo 9 was, so that then we'll have two, not one, but two landings on the moon in 2028. SaveManSpace.com, you'll find some of my writings on the topic.
Well, Art, this has been a very interesting conversation. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for coming on.
You're always welcome. Always a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
New evidence in a Toronto bomb hoax that led to the cancellation of a U.S.-based performing arts company shows. The presenters say the suspect is tied to the Chinese Communist Party. More news after this.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun. Get tickets now at shenyun.com. The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano.
Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. A day ahead of high-stakes summit in Pakistan, President Trump warning the Iranian regime to take negotiations seriously. The work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz continues. Iran is still holding the critical passage hostage. The steps President Trump is now taking. Oil prices pulling back slightly today, but remaining elevated as tensions persist around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, stocks open higher before taking a slight dip. A big legal blow for Meta Platforms. Massachusetts top court says the tech giant must answer claims in knowingly addicted teens. A 3-judge panel of the International Trade Court hears another round of tariff arguments today, this time over President Trump's new global tariffs. Arlene Richards has the highlights from the proceedings. The Artemis II Orion is gearing up to splash down in the Pacific tonight. Jason Blair has highlights from the cruise trip. New evidence in a Toronto bomb hoax that led to the cancellation of a U.S.-based performing arts company's shows. Presenters say the suspect is tied to the Chinese Communist Party.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Thank you for joining us. Vice President JD Vance is on his way to Pakistan for a high-stakes summit with Iran tomorrow. The talks will mark the highest-level meeting between the U.S. and Iran since 1979. What's the latest from the president on Iran? White House correspondent Mariotu has more.
President Trump is now warning Tehran to take the peace talks tomorrow seriously or face further military action from the U.S. He told the New York Post this morning, quote, "We're loading up the ships." He's also taking to Truth Social to say, quote, "The Iranians don't seem to realize that they have no cards other than a short-term extortion of the world by international waterways. The only reason they are alive today is to negotiate." And Don, this is coming just a day after President Trump says Iran is doing a, quote, "very poor job," some may even say a dishonorable, of allowing oil to go through the Strait of Hormuz, saying that was not the original agreement between the U.S. and Iran. He's also saying there are now reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait, warning that they must stop immediately. And here's Vice President Vance today on his way to Pakistan, where he'll be joined tomorrow by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for those negotiations. Take a look.
We're looking forward to the negotiation. I think it's going to be positive. We'll, of course, see. As the President of the United States said, if the Iranians are willing to negotiate in good faith, we're certainly willing to extend the open hand. If they're going to try to play us, then they're going to find that the negotiating team is not that receptive. So we're going to try to have a positive negotiation. The president has gave us some pretty clear guidelines, and we're going to see.
And Don, we have not seen President Trump publicly today, but he did tell the New York Post, quote, that this pause can be lifted at any time if he feels that the talks aren't going well. He says that we have a reset going. We're loading up the ships with the best ammunition, the best weapons we've ever made, saying that they're even better than what we did previously during Operation Epic Fury and that we blew them apart then. He says, quote, "If we don't have a deal, we'll be using them effectively, very effectively." And Don, we should see the president in a couple of hours when he heads to Charlottesville, Virginia for a MAGA Inc. roundtable and dinner tonight, and hopefully he'll take reporter questions on the way out. Back to you.
Okay, Mari, thank you. White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett saying the Strait of Hormuz will be open within 2 months. Here he is on Fox Business this morning.
Do you think we can open the straits and get the flow of oil going within the next, say, 2 months?
Yes. So, I can't go into, classified stuff, but first, we're very, very hopeful. We've got the A team going to Pakistan to negotiate with the Iranians, and we also have backup plans if necessary.
Okay.
Hassett says removing the Iranian regime would make the world better off in the long run. He points to higher potential for economic growth and investment in the Gulf area once the threat of Iran is removed. He also says energy prices will drop once the Strait of Hormuz reopens, adding that only about 10% of the normal traffic is transiting through the waterway. Ship tracking data shows the strait seeing minimal traffic today. Between Wednesday and yesterday morning, only 7 ships passed through the strait, a fraction of the 140 ships that would normally pass. The work to reopen the Strait of Hormuz continues. Iran is still holding the critical passage hostage. President Trump sending a warning to the regime while working on a solution with foreign leaders. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastar has the latest on the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz on Friday, still seeing minimal traffic. Tracking data from marine traffic shows that almost no ships are passing through. Most vessels sailing through the strait are linked to Iran. Also on Friday, an Israeli intelligence official telling Fox News that Iran is charging a fee for ships to pass, saying the strait is effectively under full Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps control. They decide who gets to go through, but more importantly, who doesn't. This corresponds with a statement from President Trump made a day earlier, saying there are reports that Iran is charging fees to tankers going through the Hormuz Strait. They better not be, and if they are, they better stop now.
Military and diplomatic strength.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying he spoke with President Trump on Thursday night about reopening the passage. Here's what they discussed.
Been pulling together a coalition of countries, now over 30 countries, working on a political and diplomatic plan, but also looking at military capabilities and actually the logistics of actually moving vessels through the strait. So that was the focus of the discussion last night.
Prime Minister Starmer completing a trip to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, where they discussed reopening Hormuz and the current ceasefire. Starmer says him and the Gulf nations agreed on several points.
Strait of Hormuz has to be part of the solution, a very strong sense that there can't be tolling or restrictions on that navigation.
Britain's Foreign Secretary agrees, saying the Strait of Hormuz must be fully reopened without restrictions or tolls. The blocking of this vital waterway is hitting trade around the world. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Now, turning to energy, oil prices pulling back slightly today, but remaining elevated as tensions persist around the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. crude briefly topped $100 a barrel before easing, while Brent also edged higher. Shipping through the vital route remains severely restricted, keeping markets on edge. The waterway is responsible for about 20% of global oil supply. Meanwhile, stocks opened higher. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq gained ground after March inflation came in largely as expected, despite pressure from the Iran conflict. The Dow, S&P 500, and Nasdaq all ticking up at the opening bell as investors weigh the stability of the ceasefire. All three indexes dipped slightly this afternoon. Inflation is heating up again, this time almost entirely driven by the war in Iran. The annual rate rising to 3.3% in March, the highest level since May 2024. That's according to a Bureau of Labor Statistics report issued today. It says the increase was almost totally driven by a spike in energy prices. Core inflation, which does not factor in food and energy prices, ticked up just slightly to 2.6% from 2.5%. That's still below expectations of 2.7%. The rise wasn't a surprise to analysts, but the key question now is whether these price pressures will stick in the months ahead. To talk more about March's inflation report, we have Joseph Trevisani, economic and currency analyst at FX Street. So, Joseph, welcome. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hi, Don. How are you? Nice. It's a lovely day up here in the city, and so it's a good time to be around.
Yeah, I'm glad it's getting warmer. But that's a great segue because it's not the only thing that's getting warmer. The annual rate rising to 3.3% in March. Given energy prices at the moment, I mean, was this surprising to you? Did you expect this?
Well, this is not surprising at all. I mean, we finally have an excellent justification for the core CPI number, which has long been said to only track, long-term trends in inflation. And this is one of those perfect justifications for it, because the price that's been driven in the oil, over $100 at one point, about 96 today, is almost entirely responsible for the inflation numbers that we're seeing in March. So for that, we don't really have any expectation that this is going to become a permanent part. Now, if, of course, the oil prices stay high, then we have an entirely different ballgame. For at the moment, markets, and I would say statisticians and everyone else, is expecting the oil price to come back down to where it was before the start of this war.
Okay, so with that being said, can you talk about what you think the Fed is thinking right now? Because they look at core inflation more, right? And that excludes energy. So how are they looking at this report?
Well, if you look at these, if you just take a market judgment on this and look at the CME futures is showing no rate increase at all, or really a rate decrease at all this year. So I think the Fed is taking exactly that point of view. Certainly when we listen to Chairman Powell for the remainder of his term, of what he said before, there really isn't any indication that the Fed is about to do anything or that they see the ground shifting on inflation so that they have to do something. And I think you would say the same about the jobs picture and the economy. At the moment, everything is in stasis. It's not really moving a lot in either direction. So I don't think the Fed is planning on doing anything right now.
Okay, so you said inflation will come down after, this whole thing is over. How long would that take? What are you looking at specifically that is going to be the trigger of the coming down of inflation?
Well, an immediate trigger would, of course, be some sort of agreement between the United States and Iran. But I think you're going to see, I think there is some potential here for a longer term run on inflation higher, because if there is, right now there's a ceasefire, a marginal ceasefire, if you will. I mean, the United States and Israel are not bombing Iran right now. The Iranians are still doing, or were doing, some attacks on Gulf states. So it's not really a ceasefire. And I don't think anyone can pretend that the issues at stake in this conflict have at all been settled. The two sides on their demands are very, very far apart, or the two sides on their negotiating positions are very, very far apart. So it is quite possible that we maintain a higher oil price for a considerable amount of time. That, I think, is becoming a possibility. It's not one that's been really been factored into the markets yet, but I think it's becoming a possibility because it's always going to be questionable whether or not the ceasefire or whatever agreement is reached will be held, and it will hold, and it will take quite some time for the markets and the oil price to gain confidence in that.
Okay, so you're saying it's going to take some time to gain confidence. So Economic Director Kevin Hassett said today that he's very hopeful the Strait of Hormuz will open in less than 2 months. So 2 months here. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would be hopeful too, but it is a situation that is a political and a military situation that is not terribly predictable. When this war started, one of the things that I said and many others said as well, whatever it looks like at the beginning of the war, wars often do not end where people expect them to. They don't end with the results, and they often don't end with the duration when that people go into it for. Everyone is hopeful when they start a war, usually, that it's going to be quick and clean. It almost never is. So I think that is the issue that we have here. Whether or not the strait reopens, well, what does that mean? Does that mean we return to 100, 150 ships transversing the strait a day? Does it mean that 50 ships go through? Whatever it is, I think it will take time to build, even with everything going as well as can be expected, it will take time, 2 months, maybe more, we don't know, for the traffic to build up to a level where markets are confident enough to send oil back down to $70 or $60 a barrel.
So you're talking about confidence. So let me ask you, the rise in oil prices, do you think that's mostly due to fear or sentiment, or is it actually about physical supply disruption? What is the balance between those two right now?
Well, I think largely it's physical. I mean, this is a real situation. There's 20% of the what you've heard many times from many commentators, about 20% of the oil, the global production, global shipping of oil comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, that's a 20% tax on the oil price. So it's a real situation. Yes, it is driven somewhat by fear, at least it was in the beginning. But right now, I would say it is driven by the facts. After all, if we were really worried about what would happen and say that oil fields in Saudi Arabia or others were going to suffer damage throughout that part of the Gulf, then you would see oil a lot higher, because that would mean that there is a semi-permanent, takes a long time to build these fields back up once they're seriously damaged. You would see a much higher fear-driven price of oil. So right now, I think it's just the fact that 20% of the world's oil supply is not getting to the market.
Okay, so let's talk a bit more about this inflation report that we got. Besides energy, is there anything else that you noticed?
Well, there is the oil. We had a bump in inflation the early part of the year. It has started to trend off again. But this, the problem with oil is not just a commodity. Oil is a basic ingredient in everything we do, we eat, we wear. It's the basic industrial commodity of the world. It is the basic energy commodity of the world. Natural gas is there. So much depends on the energy complex for the type of civilization that we run that it can never be just a one event. It's not just the price of gas that goes into your car. As the longer this stays higher, the longer energy costs are more expensive, the more this goes through the economy. The longer it stays higher, the more you build up inflationary expectations. And if there is a permanent state of distress, if you will, in this part of the world, in the Gulf, then oil prices will stay higher. So all of these things are not clean factors, but they all are very important. And I think we stand a chance here of a permanently higher, or not permanently, but a longer term effect on inflation, which will be more than just the oil price.
And we're seeing that in gas prices as well. I'm wondering if gas prices stay elevated or whatever else, how long would it take before demand destruction kicks in?
Well, I don't think, in general, if you're talking about the United States, in general for Americans, gas prices have to go considerably higher, I think, than they did now. After all, remember a year ago, gas prices were just about right where they are now. So I don't think we've seen enough of a gas price hike to create demand destruction in the United States. Americans like to drive It is an essential part of the life and the lifestyle of almost everyone in this country. Perhaps where I live, Manhattan, it's not, but almost everywhere else it is. And so that generally higher oil prices at this rate, at this level, do not cause demand destruction. If you get gas up to $5 and $6 a barrel, yes, in much of the country you would see demand destruction. You would also see people curtailing their other spending because they have to fund their gas. So it's not there yet. It's a potential.
Okay, Joseph, just one last question here. And I'm wondering, because I'm not an expert on this, if President Trump said that the U.S. doesn't really rely on the Strait of Hormuz, why are U.S. gas prices going up due to this war?
Well, he's correct in the sense that the United States is self-sufficient in gas and oil and natural gas. There's plenty here and plenty to export, but the prices are set on the world market. And that will remain true whether or not the U.S. is self-sufficient or not. U.S. prices, it's not a single market here in the United States. As I said, prices are set on the world market. 20% of supply has a large effect on price, and it's going to stay that way. That's not going to change.
Well, all right, Joseph, always great to talk to you. Thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Everyone have a good time there.
You as well. The Artemis II Orion is gearing up to splash down in the Pacific tonight. Jason Blair has highlights from the cruise trip. A 3-judge panel of the International Trade Court hears another round of tariff arguments today, this time over President Trump's new global tariffs. Arlene Richards has highlights from the proceedings.
This is how I keep my joints happy.
Omega XL is a powerful natural supplement backed by 40 years of clinical research. Take control of your pain, like Cynthia Bailey.
My knees in particular started giving me pain issues all the way back to my modeling days, from just running through airports, photo shoots. After taking Omega XL, I really started to notice how less stiff I was, especially my knees and my hip. Has Omega XL changed my life? Yes. I barely notice my joint pain anymore. Now I'm like literally sprinting through the airports. My secret is Omega XL.
Pick up the phone and call now to get this exclusive TV offer. Buy one Omega XL and we'll send you a second bottle absolutely free. You'll also get a free bottle of Vitamin XL D3. Buy one, get two free. A total value of over $115, all for just $49.95. You save more than 55% and shipping is free. Backed by a money-back guarantee and is not available in stores. Operators are standing by, so call now.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
They're just young people, hungry, homeless, and vulnerable. Abused youth often feel safer on the street. Now, more than ever, that's the most dangerous place of all. Covenant House is helping young adults facing homelessness. We're providing safe shelter to thousands, but the need is overwhelming, and no young person is ever turned away. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month to help a young person. You'll provide safe shelter, hot meals, and medical care. Your gift will show them they're loved. Homeless young people are afraid and alone with nowhere else to turn.
You want to know that there's somewhere you can go that's safe. So the Covenant House did that for us.
Please call now with your gift of $19 a month. We'll send you this blanket as a reminder of the comfort your gift provides a young person tonight. Please don't wait. Your gift is the lifeline a young person needs now. Call the number on your screen or go online to safeplacetosleep.org. Thank you for saving precious lives.
The Artemis II crew expected to land back on Earth. And this is after going around the Earth for a couple days. Tonight, they're going to land in the Pacific Ocean. NTD correspondent Jason Blair joins us now. So before we get into the landing, what are the goals of the Artemis II mission?
Hey, Don. Yeah, so the goal for the Artemis II mission is basically a 10-day space flight to do a test flight around the moon and come back and basically test the Orion spaceship out and see how it does in deep space, get some more info, and prepare ultimately to send a man back to the moon.
So what are some of the highlights here from the trip?
Well, despite it being just a test run, the crew did break an all-time record, becoming the farthest humans to travel away from Earth, breaking the Apollo 13 record set in the 1970s. They traveled about 253,000 miles from Earth, breaking the other record by about 4,000 miles. And they did travel around the far side of the moon, getting about 4,000 miles from the surface of the moon. And during that trip, they had about 6 hours to get some new information to document the moon and also see some of the parts of the moon that have never been seen before by humans on the far side of the moon before circling around and coming back. And I do have some clips from NASA from some highlights of the trip. Let's go ahead and play those.
We continue to improve to make our ultimate goals of going to the lunar surface, building the moon base, and eventually sending the first humans to Mars a reality.
For the first time since 1972, during Apollo 17, human beings have left Earth orbit.
When we were on the far side of the moon and out of contact with planet Earth, we all knew it, and it was a milestone. We saw Earth disappear.
Today you've made history and made all America really proud. What is the most unforgettable part of this really historic day? The whole world is watching and listening. Please tell me.
And we saw sites, Oriental sites that no human has ever seen before, not even in Apollo, and that was amazing for us.
Now, the crew also took an image yesterday of the Milky Way, which is stunning and free from atmospheric interference.
So, Don, not everything went smooth on the ride, though. The only toilet on board did have a few hiccups, especially in the beginning. And as you can imagine, being the only working toilet available to the crew, they did want to get that back in operating shape. I do also have some clips highlighting that problem throughout the trip. Let's go ahead and play those.
I like to say that it is probably the most important piece of equipment on board.
You are no-go for toilet.
It's kind of a complex engineering issue when you expose a liquid to vacuum. It's a pretty chaotic environment.
Which one of you was the plumber?
I'll take that one. I'm the space plumber. I'm proud to call myself the space plumber. We were all breathing a sigh of relief when it turned out to be just fine. It was just an issue, I think, of sitting for a long time and needing a little time to warm up, a priming issue.
So after a few hiccups, the toilet did work the majority of the time, according to NASA. So the crew was, fairly relieved to be able to have that working toilet on board.
Yeah, and how about the upcoming landing back on Earth? I know a crew has been preparing on the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, Don. So there has been a crew out there getting ready. The Artemis Orion ship is expected to come in the Earth's atmosphere right above Hawaii, about southeast of Hawaii, and travel in about 13 minutes. They're going to travel roughly 2,000 miles just off the coast of San Diego, where they're going to splash down into the Pacific Ocean. Divers are going to be approaching the Orion first, making sure everything's safe. They're going to put the crew on some rafts. They're going to take them to a helicopter, and the helicopters are going to transport them over to the ship standing by, and then they'll be back, making their way back to land again after their 10-day journey. So we'll be seeing that later on tonight.
All right, Jason, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told independent journalist or YouTube news influencer Nick Shirley that between $250 to $500 billion each year of U.S. GDP that comes through Washington, D.C. is lost to waste, fraud, and abuse as well.
Our lead effort is to integrate all the agencies and figure out where the money's going. We're setting up a do not pay system, which over time will
allow us to follow the money, we will be able to follow whether it's HHS or HUD or anywhere else.
Bessent said the Treasury will analyze suspicious activity and data from banks on unusual payments to determine if fraud is taking place, as in Minneapolis. Bessent said guardrails against fraud were taken down during the Biden administration during COVID and were never put back. Bessent also noted that in a new move, whistleblowers can make up to 30% as a reward for recoveries of fraudulent funds. Tariffs 2.0. Democrat-led states and small businesses were back in the International Trade Court today. This time, they're challenging the president's global tariffs applied under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. President Trump turned this section after the Supreme Court ruled against his use of an emergency powers law. NTD's Arlene Richards has more from the proceeding.
A federal trade court in New York on Friday grappled for more than 3 hours with both sides over the legality of President Trump's latest global tariffs and the attorneys' different interpretations of a phrase in the trade statute.
And now I have to figure out with my colleagues, we have to put our heads together and try to figure out what that term balance of payments deficit means as a term used in a statute.
In February, President Trump immediately imposed temporary 10% global tariffs under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 in response to the Supreme Court's ruling against his global tariffs under a different statute. 2 small businesses and 24 states are challenging the new tariffs. In his new tariff proclamation, the president cited the nation's large, persistent, and serious balance of payments deficit, which occurs when a country spends more on foreign trade than it earns. The panel struggled to understand what the balance of payments deficit means in the statute.
I mean, I'm saying if we disagreed with your interpretation of what a balance of payments deficit is there any way to say, well, actually, you can look at liquidity, and really what the president's talking about in his proclamation is the same thing as a liquidity deficit. That's what I'm trying to ask.
Mm-hmm. And our interpretation is that it means a deficit in one of the accounts. Okay. And then the question is, what are the accounts? Well, the statute doesn't fix in time the specific accounts, right? It leaves it to the president's discretion, doesn't identify by name. Well, it only has to be a liquidity issue, or it only has to be in the basic balance.
The attorney for new plaintiff businesses responded this way.
They say current account deficit, but it's not clear to me how they're finding that balance of payments deficit means current account deficit if they say it can be a component. If that's true, then why is it just one component? Why is it just current account? Why isn't it any component?
The plaintiffs have asked the court to decide the case as a matter of law or to pause the president's tariffs if the case moves through the courts. The panel didn't rule on Friday. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
The Justice Department has settled a lawsuit alleging social media censorship under the Biden administration's State Department. The DOJ said the State Department actively silenced disfavored speech, particularly through its so-called Global Engagement Center. According to the lawsuit, the Biden administration funded and promoted private companies' development of censorship technologies. The DOJ alleged that social media companies and other private entities used those tools to downgrade, demonetize, and suppress protected speech online. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche said, quote, "The weaponization of the Biden administration against the American people who they disfavored is over." And Republican senators are set to meet with President Trump today to discuss the DHS funding stalemate and a historic shutdown that's lasted over 50 days. NTD's Melania Trump reports.
Lawmakers out of town for recess amid the longest partial government shutdown in history. Today, top senators will meet with President Trump to discuss a path forward to fund the immigration enforcement aspect of the department without any Democrat votes. The Senate's number 2 Republican, Senator John Barrasso, told reporters yesterday, "We're going to have to go it alone because the Democrats aren't interested in funding national security at a time of increased concerns around the world." Barrasso saying the idea was to get it done quickly in a targeted way. President Trump wants the GOP-only bill by June 1st.
And I will answer President Trump's call to fund ICE and the Border Patrol by June 1st through reconciliation. I will lead this charge. We will give funding to ICE and Border Patrol without one Democratic vote because they will never give us their vote.
The DHS stalemate dragged on for more than 50 days. It started due to Democrat demands for changes to ICE policy.
I will vote no on any legislation that funds ICE until it is reined in and overhauled.
But now that Republicans are using a party line process to fund ICE, Democrats' reform demands will go unmet.
They got zero of that. So they wanted all these restrictions on law enforcement agencies, on ICE and CBP. They got none of that. They walked away from the table.
Today's meeting with the president comes as the House is expected to vote next week on a measure to fund the DHS without immigration enforcement. Some House Republicans have rejected the proposal. ICE was funded throughout the shutdown and will be for several years due to previous funding from the GOP's One Big Beautiful Bill. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
A Haitian national accused of hitting a woman to death with a hammer outside a Florida gas station last week will face deportation. The Department of Homeland Security says the individual illegally entered the United States in 2022, but was granted temporary protected status under the Biden administration.
Temporary protective status was never designed to be a permanent stay in the United States, but for decades it's been abused as a de facto amnesty program. As we have ended TPS, the courts have obstructed the administration from restoring integrity to our immigration system. On March 11th, Trump administration and the Supreme Court asked the Supreme Court to clear the way for it to end TPS for more than 350,000 Haitian immigrants. The case that occurred here in Fort Myers highlights the president's objective to restore law and order to our country and enforce immigration laws enacted by Congress.
The Obama administration first granted a temporary protected status designation to Haiti in 2010 after the country was hit by a devastating earthquake. TPS allows individuals from countries affected by armed conflict, natural disasters, or other extraordinary events to remain in the U.S. on a temporary basis. Under President Trump, the Department of Homeland Security has taken steps to end TPS for about a dozen countries. The Supreme Court is expected to hear the case this month. A sheriff's deputy shot and killed while serving an eviction notice in Central Florida. Authorities say a gunman opened fire yesterday as deputies arrived at a home in Porterville. Deputy Randy Hoppert was part of a group responding to the initial gunfire. The Tulare County Sheriff saying that he died later at a hospital. Authorities identifying the suspect as 59-year-old David Morales. Sheriff Boudreaux says Morales has been expecting law enforcement and lay in wait before the attack, the standoff lasting for hours before Morales was run over and killed by deputies driving a SWAT vehicle. The sheriff issuing a warning saying, quote, "Don't shoot at cops. You shoot at cops, we're going to run you over." California Governor Gavin Newsom releasing a statement honoring Deputy Hoppert, saying his selflessness, bravery, and commitment to protecting others stand as a lasting example of honor and duty. First Lady Melania Trump is pushing back against what she calls false smears linking her to Jeffrey Epstein, vowing legal action against those making the claims.
The lies linking me with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. The individuals lying about me are devoid of ethical standards, humility, and respect. I do not object to their ignorance, but rather I reject their mean-spirited attempts to defame my reputation. I never been friends with Epstein. Donald and I were invited to the same parties as Epstein from time to time, since overlapping in social circles is common in New York City and Palm Beach. To be clear, I never had a relationship with Epstein or his accomplice, Maxwell.
The First Lady did not mention any specific allegations that were made, but said her name has never appeared in court documents, victim statements, or FBI interviews tied to the case. She is now calling on Congress to hold public hearings, allowing Epstein's victims to testify under oath and have their accounts entered into the official record. She says her legal team will continue pursuing action against what she describes as baseless and politically motivated claims. And a suspect accused of throwing a Molotov cocktail at the home of OpenAI CEO Sam Altman is in custody. Police say officers responded to the San Francisco residence early this morning after an assailant set fire to an exterior gate before running away. Less than an hour later, police were called to a business in a different part of the city where the suspect allegedly threatened to burn down the building. The individual is also accused of making threats at OpenAI's headquarters. OpenAI confirmed the report, saying no one was hurt. The ChatGPT creator says it's assisting in the investigation. And new evidence in a Toronto bomb hoax that led to the cancellation of a U.S.-based performing arts company's shows. Presenters say the suspect is tied to the Chinese Communist Party. More news after this.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It felt like an elephant pressing on my chest. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I was rushed into surgery where I received 2 stents in my arteries. Stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. I can enjoy life with my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Heart disease is America's #1 killer. And your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
Being a cowboy, I don't know anything different from when I was 3 or 4 years old. I did tough things. I thought everybody needed to do tough things, and if you didn't, I didn't have time for it. I had a very successful career at a very young age, and life was fast. I was preparing physically. I wasn't doing anything mentally on the inside, and then I got hurt. I wanted to be better as a person, and I really dug into mental health. I start my day with 20-minute workouts. I live life 8 seconds at a time. Horses are so therapeutic. They know what you're feeling. When you're nervous, they're nervous. He won't say it back, but we're pals. I take a lot of responsibility in taking care of my kids, my family, being there for them. You're gonna have tough days. Everybody does. Find a place to stop and just breathe. Love your mind.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expelled Spain from an international body monitoring Gaza. Netanyahu said Spain had defamed soldiers in the IDF. The group was created last year to monitor the Trump-brokered peace plan in Gaza. The group's work involves the planning and the stabilization and reconstruction of Gaza. Around 200 U.S. service members are working alongside the Israeli military and delegations from other countries. Netanyahu is saying he wouldn't allow any country to wage a so-called diplomatic war against Israel without paying a price. Ukraine's president revealing that Ukrainian forces have been involved in shooting down Iranian drones in the Middle East. He says Russia also uses the same Iranian drones widely in its war against Ukraine. Zelensky hasn't specified which Middle Eastern countries hosted Ukrainian forces, but he says the developments were part of broader security arrangements. In return, Ukraine received support for protecting its energy infrastructure, along with oil, diesel, and financial assistance. Zelensky saying Ukraine is strengthening security in the Middle East in exchange for strengthening its own resilience. The revelation comes amid growing concern that conflicts in the Middle East could divert Western military aid away from Ukraine. Russia is announcing a temporary ceasefire in its war with Ukraine, set to coincide with the Orthodox Easter holiday. The Kremlin says it expects Ukraine to follow suit, calling for a pause in fighting through the weekend. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country will respond in kind, but remains cautious. Previous ceasefires have been marred by accusations of violations. Ukraine saying Russia committed hundreds of breaches on the first day last time around. Even as the pause is announced, fighting has continued. A Russian drone strike hitting port and energy infrastructure in Odessa overnight. A big legal blow for Meta Platforms. Massachusetts top court says the tech giant must answer claims in knowingly addicted teens. The son of Joe Biden called on President Trump's sons Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump to a match inside a metal cage at a public event. More news after this. Stay tuned.
What has lasted 5,000 years was once almost lost. Now, the world awaits the divine culture's return. See it at least once in your lifetime. Shen Yun returns to David Koch Theater, March 25th through April 12th. Get your tickets now at shenyun.com.
This land, our America, built on hard work, determination, and grit. Sometimes the days run long, but hope, it never runs out, even when the food does, for America's veterans, working parents, even kids. Because in every corner of every town, even yours, millions of hardworking neighbors are facing a hunger crisis, many for the very first time. In this land of plenty, affording food shouldn't require second jobs and third shifts or choosing between your groceries and bills. Today, you can help change that. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, less than 63 cents a day, to help every neighbor get the food they urgently need. Because taking care of each other is what makes America strong. We're Feeding America. Not just a name, but an action. Working with over 200 local food banks like the ones in your community. And demand is soaring.
You go to the grocery store, you spend $100, and $100 is a new $20 bill.
Even with 2 full-time jobs, it's hard to make ends meet.
These are tough times, but when we stand together, we become the very best of a strong America. Please call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Just $19 a month can feed a family today. And your first gift can double an impact. Plus, we'll send you this free canvas bag as a reminder of the hope you're delivering.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Because you're not just giving food, you're fueling resilience for people across the nation. You're feeding America. Call or go online today to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double an impact.
We said we'd never break the 3-second rule. Never do that. And never become a minivan mom.
Hey, Chris.
As parents, we say never a lot, but never happens. So when you say you'd never leave your child in a hot car, know it can happen. Before you leave the car, always stop, look, lock.
A federal judge is ordering the Pentagon to grant full press access to the building, the ruling finding the War Department violated a prior court order. The New York Times sued the Department of War last year. The legal challenge centered around an ultimatum for reporters to sign an agreement not to seek unauthorized information from Pentagon employees or give up their press credentials. A district judge last month ruled in favor of the newspaper, calling the requirement unconstitutional. Following the ruling, the Pentagon made a new policy restoring press credentials to some reporters but barring journalists from entering the Pentagon without an escort. The government said this policy didn't violate the judge's previous order. However, the Times sued again, arguing the new access limits were simply a workaround. Meta Platforms is facing a lawsuit brought by the Massachusetts Attorney General. The suit accuses Meta of designing Instagram to be addictive for children. The Massachusetts Supreme Court ruled today that the lawsuit doesn't seek to hold Meta liable for content created by its users. However, the state's high court ruled that the suit instead targets the company's conduct. Massachusetts Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell hailed the ruling. She called the decision a major step in holding social media companies accountable for fueling a youth mental health crisis. Meta has denied the allegations, arguing the company takes extensive steps to ensure its platforms are safe for teens and young people. 34 other states are pushing similar cases against Meta in federal court. Former President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is challenging President Trump's sons, Donald Jr. and Eric, to a cage match. Hunter said that social media commentator and YouTube personality Andrew Callaghan pitched the idea.
Hey guys, Hunter Biden here. I just got a call from Andrew Callahan. He asked me to come out on the Channel 5 Carnival Tour at the end of the month. I think we start in Phoenix and then we go to San Diego and we end in Albuquerque. And I think he's trying to organize a cage match, me versus Eric and Don Jr. I told him I'd do it, 100% in, if he can pull it off. And if he can't, I'm still coming.
The challenge lands against the backdrop of the nation's 250th independence celebrations. A professional UFC fight is already scheduled for June 14th at the White House. Trump first floated the idea of a White House UFC fight last July. UFC President Dana White, a close friend of Trump, is overseeing the event. Japan has canceled the Cherry Blossom Festival near Mount Fuji. Officials say overcrowding and badly behaved tourists are to blame, but some visitors are still showing up. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Cherry blossoms are in full bloom below Japan's iconic Mount Fuji. At one local park in Fuji Yoshida, visitors line up to take in the world-famous views.
Also going up, you have a beautiful
view the entire time.
Yeah, a pathway where you have all of this cherry blossom that is incredible.
Yeah,
it is incredible.
It was worth the wait, I would say so.
Yeah.
But for locals, the surge in tourism can mean traffic, litter, and sometimes bad behavior. This past February, officials in Fuji Yoshida announced they were canceling this year's annual Cherry Blossom Festival.
The reason we decided to cancel the festival this year is because we receive a large number of visitors in this area where many residents live. It's been difficult to strike a balance in maintaining a safe and a comfortable living environment for them. So we deliberately chose not to hold a festival that would actively draw in visitors.
Nevertheless, the area is still full of visitors. Local resident Hitoshi Mori says the problem is a mixed bag.
You can't go out with your car. You can only go out shopping at the end of the day or early in the morning. So I can do groceries only once a week and stock up on food. So it's both good and annoying.
Some residents just want some peace, but vendors like Kyoka Funakubo appreciate the buzz.
At one point, the streets here were empty. Shops were shuttered. But now various new shops have opened. People are starting to get active again. So I think it's nice to see the area coming back to life.
Fuji Yoshida began increasing its security presence earlier this month. The city is also limiting entry for tour buses and other vehicles into the scenic neighborhood.
I think the matter of following etiquette applies everywhere, not just here. There are rules specific to the area, so I hope people will cooperate, follow them properly, and enjoy themselves.
Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
President Trump is pushing for a reconciliation bill to fund ICE agents and Border Patrol, and he wants it on his desk by June 1st. In a Truth Social post, the president said he met with Senators Lindsey Graham and John Barrasso to discuss the funding for the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department. Trump said reconciliation is, quote, on track, adding that crime is at an all-time low and murder rates are at their lowest in 125 years. The president called on Republicans to unify and pass the bill without Democratic support, taking aim at Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, warning they would try to block the legislation. Trump said the Department of Homeland Security cannot wait any longer for funding. Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. We're taking a break. We'll be back with more news, and remember to watch NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.